Greetings, my friends and enemies. Glad you are here. We are back in business once again. I'm joined with Matt on this side. So, how you doing, Matt?
I am doing as well as can be expected, at least until we get to our topic. Then,
Say, what can we expect? It's the real question.
Yeah.
And then on this side, we got Sage.
Yeah, hello.
How you
I'm
doing?
alive, I guess. So
I guess that sounds promising.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He has his weekly allotment of life from the European Union.
Indeed.
It's not very much. All right, so we are jumping into another rendition, and I will go ahead and read it before I pull it up. So this Grima's Workshop is going to be covering Dawn Walls-Thumma, I guess is the person who does this, an analysis of fan fiction and representation within the Tolkien fan community. We were taking bets earlier on how bad this is going to be. I think it's going to be pretty bad, but who knows? I was surprised once. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. So the point of this presentation seems to be, well, I'll just read the thingy. Fan fiction and other transformative works provide one mode by which fans from marginalized groups extend and repair text to better represent more diverse people and perspectives. A process that, I think this is Una McCormack, terms reparative reading. While poor representation of diverse groups is endemic within literary and media texts, Tolkien's works are often singled out for their problematic representations of gender and race, and silence on sexuality, making his canon fruitful territory for transformative works by fans that not only recognize the existence of women, people of color, and queer characters within Middle-earth, but transform the canon to recast Tolkien stories from their perspectives. This paper will consider the historical and current use of fan fiction to address issues of representation in Tolkien's canon. Historically, the online Tolkien fan fiction community has not been receptive to reparative readings, with authors who attempted to include more diverse perspectives often harassed by peers or subjugated to gatekeeping and targeted campaigns by fandom institutions. After considering this historical context, I will use the data from 2015 and 2020 Tolkien fan fiction surveys to consider whether and how these values have changed over 20 years of significant online fan fiction fandom. These surveys consider demographics, values, and behaviors as self-reported by writers and readers of Tolkien-based fan fiction. Results of the 2015 survey showed that while the fandom was undergoing sometimes rapid evolution in norms around how diverse people from Tolkien's canon were represented in fan fiction, these changes were not fully actualized in many fandom spaces. This paper will extend that analysis using the newly completed 2020 survey results to evaluate how values and practices around representation have changed since 2015 and how fans who themselves identify as part of the marginalized groups use fan fiction to broaden the perspectives offered by and to correct racism, sexism, and homophobia found within Tolkien's canon. Other words, nonsense. So,
yeah, I take a special issue with the use of the word reparative.
I just know from that alone that this is totally off the hinges.
To quote Ozzy, it's going off the rails on the crazy train.
Going off the rails
Does
like a crazy train.
They usually go on rails anyway.
No, going off the rails.
Yeah, but that assumes it's normally on the rails.
Trains are normally on rails.
Yeah, but the crazy train, maybe not.
The crazy train goes off the rails. That's literally the term, off the rails.
Okay.
You Europeaners are just weird.
Do they allow Ozzy Osbourne music to be played in Europe? I'm wondering.
That's not allowed here.
Yeah.
No.
The commies that run the EU, you know. All right, so we've got this wonderful video, and yeah, I'm looking
long
forward
was
to it. It's 30 minutes.
Started. They're all 30 minutes.
Yeah, they're all roughly 30 minutes. Some of them, like the good one,
Well, I
honestly,
mean,
was
how
shorter.
long is our actual presentation versus the stupid questions she's going to get?
Well,
That depends.
When does like
About 20 minutes? About 20 minutes.
Okay, yeah.
okay, I think. Will we survive?
All right, are we ready for some cringe? Because okay, so before we start, I would like to point out, fan fiction people in general are usually a different type of beast. Can you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
Not exactly.
They're not usually the run-of-the-mill fan. They're definitely not the gatekeeper fans in most situations.
Well, like there's a large fan fiction community, and most of it's like some dude who like imagines, like it would
Dragons.
be cool if like Legolas killed 10 orcs instead of 5 or whatever. You know what I mean? They just write some little 3
Wow.
chapters that come into their head about a scene or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I could see
That's
that
just
as long as
canon.
as long as they said that to like in lore universe possibilities. I don't think I would care. I don't think most people would care. But there are those that would be like, no, Tolkien didn't write
They'll
this,
do
that's
stuff
not
like
real.
what if Gimli invented a gun? You know, I mean,
Yeah, okay.
like that's the majority of fan
That's-
fiction. You know,
and I don't see that happening, but
no. What I'm saying,
I know, but I'm saying like what would be realistic to expect in a fan fiction of Lord of the Rings? That's what I'm trying to.
There's a whole subset of the out there stuff with the sort of sexual stuff and the
deviance.
joy and you know, all that sort of weird stuff. You know, that's probably where she's. Well, I think she said she's doing it from a survey. The question is, who answered the survey? Like,
She in the thing it said it was people who are part of the fan fiction community.
yeah, but like, did she go looking for people and survey them, or did she just post some poll somewhere?
I suppose we will find out if she even offers that information. I would assume it'd just be a poll.
Like the first could actually produce scientifically valid data if you normalize it for certain trends and whatever. The second is just whoever bothers to answer a poll. Yeah.
Let's see if we're going. All right. But yeah, I wanted to point out fan fiction communities a bit weird. I liked how they added the whole gatekeeping thing. I'm like, gatekeeping is literally the job of the fandom to protect the source material from external forces. So
if you don't keep the gates, you get eaten by a bear.
Yeah.
If you don't got walls, you are susceptible to dying, like the Star Wars community. Anyway, here we go. Oh, actually, before we do, let me share my audio so you can hear it.
Assume the position.
That's not the position, but anyway.
Today, I'd like to consider fan fiction about Tolkien's world, the history of this vast community, and how it is used and not used storytelling to address issues of representation and diversity in Middle-earth. To begin, what is fan fiction? I could devote a 20-minute.
At least this has slides. Thank God.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's
That makes it
actually an actual presentation.
good, I guess.
I would say it's good. It's just it's at least a well thought of representation. I'm just hoping that it actually
better than the previous ones.
Yeah.
That Russian art one was pretty good.
The Russian art one was a really good one.
But I'm talking about the shitty previous ones.
I'm saying like compared to the ones that we had, like the Indian one where she would say a whole bunch of stuff but not show a presentation for like half of it or 3/4 of it. So at least this we get this in it. So
Paper to the finer points of the debate around the definition of a term that for most of us can probably be summed up along the lines of Justice Potter Stewart's definition of pornography. You know it when you see it. For my purposes, I will consider fan fiction as any fictional work that draws elements from an existing literary, media, or other text. Furthermore, fan fiction writers do not receive monetary compensation for their work, distinguishing them culturally from the producers of big budget adaptations.
Yeah, they all have Patreons.
I don't know. Matt, you might know more about that monetary situation. If the fan fiction can get paid without being legally sued or whatever.
I mean, they're not getting paid for the work.
You can't commercialize the product because you don't own it.
But they get donations.
People can give you money if they like it.
Okay. So,
like, here's very specific. Like, if you have a Patreon or something like that, people can sign up and support you.
Mm-hmm.
But you cannot, as part of your Patreon, directly offer. I will, for commercial reasons, so to speak.
Mhm.
And
You have
even then,
for free, and then people just pay you if they like
I mean,
it.
essentially, they pay you because they think, "Oh, this is good. I want to pay you for it."
Yeah.
But it's not technically for
Yeah.
the work.
Salient example in this case, even if their creative processes look remarkably the same. When I say that fan fiction writers and the writers of sanctioned adaptations differ culturally from one another, I begin to get to the heart of my paper today. Sanctioned adaptations, such as the Peter Jackson film trilogies, tend to retain and even amplify racist and sexist aspects of the legendarium. A generation of fans went free to imagine orcs however they.
And you thought this would be potentially good.
all the good is
I
over.
tried to drop the percentage chance for that much lower than 20.
The good was gone when I read the freaking under the video. Like I didn't even get into the video playing.
Is it too difficult for these morons to understand that orcs are white people? Is it too fucking difficult? Oh my god! Just, I want to wear a T-shirt that says "Tolkien orcs are white people." I just want to wear like anything, and I go to one of these
It can't be.
conventions.
Look at their skin color. Maybe that's not white. They don't count.
Obviously, never burned.
Like if I were healthy, I'd be a full Sicilian troll. I would be going to these conventions wearing that type of T-shirt and saying, just saying, no, you're wrong. Just let them assault me. If I were healthy, it would bounce off me like nothing, you know.
Mm-hmm. Also, there's some non-Tolkien characters on this.
Yeah.
To be fair, she did say sanctioned adaptations. So
Okay, fair enough.
Please, for example, now assume they are dark-skinned and dreadlocked. Women characters in
dreadlock. There's no dreadlocks.
Celtic people wore dreadlocks before.
I know, but I'm saying like Lurtz doesn't have dreads.
Well, she's calling them dreads. She's calling all of those braids dreads.
Long hair. My gosh.
Yeah, it's basically
European people. There's evidence of Europe. The oldest evidence of dreadlocks are in cave paintings in England.
I know, but what I'm saying is that anything here braided is at best what it would be. Dreads, not even close. Nothing here represents.
You're just skipping over her false our ignorance. For those listening to this, right?
Didn't she say something like imagine rather than? Didn't she say imagine rather than these are?
Maybe, I don't know. I don't remember. I kind of blacked it out already.
heroic roles, some of them canonical, such as Eowyn, others elevated, such as Arwen, and others invented entirely, like Tariel, still find their romantic interest centered in a way.
She gets credit for that. She'll get credit for that.
I give her credit for that.
Like
I don't know why Lurtz is in the picture, but okay.
Well, he's the example of the,
it has nothing to do with
the other side, I guess.
Aragorn. And queer characters remain entirely absent.
Yeah, obviously.
He's not queer.
Yeah, that's why they remain absent.
It's not even debatable. Look, he is not even queer in the mindset. It has absolutely nothing to do with queerness. Their relationship is not of a queer nature. It's completely just friendship and brotherly love, which is not queer.
Well, actually, in the novel,
it's
mentorship. He looks up to, aside from being his master,
it's more like a master and servant. Yeah.
Also his mentor.
They're really I hate this so much.
For decades now, fan studies scholars have asserted that fan fiction is different. Unbeholden to powerful economic interests that benefit from maintaining the status quo, fan fiction writers have the potential to transform text to make room for typically marginalized voices. Fan studies scholars...
Remind me who Nerdinal Matan is?
I think Nerdinal might be Feanor's wife.
Oh, wait, no, Nerdinal... Yeah, Nerdinal was Feanor's wife. I don't know what that has to do with anything. Is red hair common among elves? I don't remember that.
It's common among the Vanyar, I think.
Maybe she was a Vanyar then, I guess.
Overall would assert this as a, if not the primary purpose of fan fiction. For example, in a 2006 article, Abigail Derecho termed fan fiction the literature of the subordinate. for its potential to open text to perspectives and voices excluded by publishing and media industries that have only recently and feebly begun to stir towards realizing that a tiny minority of the world's population, cisgender straight white males, does not in fact hold all the good stories.
What?
Well, apparently they do if they're the ones selling and your crap isn't.
Okay. So approximately half the world are men, and approximately, I'm going to say, to be conservative, at least 90% of us are straight, and we're a tiny percentage of the world's population. Good math there.
I mean, actually, if you look at some UK census data from recent years, it's more like 97%.
Well, I'm being conservative, you know. I'm giving her saying that it might be 10% gay men somewhere. I'm just saying that, you know. For France, France might be like a very.
But to be fair, there's also some non-existent ones. You know, the made-up versions in that remaining 3%. So who knows?
Yeah. I just can't. I can't.
Tolkien scholar Una McCormick, speaking specifically of Tolkien-based fan fiction, made a similar assertion with her idea of reparative reading, that fans who do not see themselves in the stories can use fan fiction to expand.
The whole seeing yourself in something is literally a new concept and was not accepted by the entirety of the world for thousands of years.
Well,
it was something
I would disagree there in the sense that.
Let me explain. In the sense that the story itself, people didn't go and listen to a story by the storytellers, the bards, the glee folk, whoever it might be, whoever the person, theater performers, whatever. People didn't go and say, "Oh wow, I can see myself in this." What they would do is they'd go see what the thing was about. It's a play about, I don't know, the 300 Spartans. They don't be like, "Oh, I see myself in this." They'd be like, "Wow, that's an interesting event." They would go and say, "Oh, wow, I wish I was back then." But they would never say, "That's me." Like, kids might go around and say, "I'm going to be, freaking, I don't know, pick a character." I'm trying to think of it.
Okay. So what I'm saying is this notion of seeing yourself in the product, this is a Marxist thing. This is a method of deconstruction and subversion done by Marxists to destroy a product. That's what I want to make the point of there.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, like, the concept of, like, oh, wow, I don't see myself. Like, in these three images, obviously the Fingon and Maedhros having a moment, I don't see myself in that. That's not how I would see.
I can't see myself in incest, personally.
Also, I can't even see Fingon and Maedhros in those.
Yeah, there's no Fingon or Maedhros, but and then the women of color, I don't know what that has to do with anything. It looks like that looks like a drawing of, I'm guessing, India, Asia, and Africa in the same
Maybe.
image.
Are those dwarves?
I don't know, because their beards aren't beards. They look like they're braids or something. Maybe
The middle picture is.
But they're not beards. They're like accessories stuck to their face, kind of a thing. I don't know what that means. The nerd know, sure, I guess. I mean, at least it in itself is a well done art history. I'd say that.
None of that is bad looking drawing. I'm not gonna go and say nitpick the art. I disagree with the content of the art, but I'm not gonna nitpick the actual.
I like one of these more than the others, just from the art style perspective. Let's put it that way. But anyway,
Legendarium to include more diverse perspectives. For anyone interested in more diverse stories, the possibilities represented by fan fiction become enormous and exciting. Before I begin, I want to define.
By the way, just for point of point, her name is not Nordana Matan. Elves don't have last names; they have titles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Matan's the
our dad,
father, right?
Our dad.
Yeah.
Well, it's nerd.
Okay, it says no, Matan's daughter. No,
it's poorly fonted in there.
Yeah.
Term I'm going to use a lot.
It's under the bar. Like, I can't see anything below. I see Nordana Matan, and I just see by fillet. That's a fillet, whatever.
Yes, fillet.
I'm kind of skimming. I can see it might be the top of a D over the little foam thing on the bar.
You can move the bar.
Can you?
Wait, what?
Just hover over a part that's not a button.
Oh,
and you
okay.
can
There you go.
move it.
I moved down. Oh, I can see it now. It says daughter. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's just the
It's
daughter.
on
It
the top.
should have been Nerdnell, and then either Matan moved down or daughter moves up. That is just poorly designed in that
Yeah.
regard.
Or just go for the 3 rows, like the right in the middle one.
I don't freaking know. Oh,
Canon.
I remember what I was going to
Graphics
say.
design, right?
I was going to say the whole thing. If you have to see yourself because of the marginalized group or intersex or something of that nature, you don't care about the story.
Well, okay. No. Let's be fair. Okay, it's fine to fantasize about yourself in a story. It, however, is not a failing of the story that is not like your particular culture or whatever.
You can
It's
see
not
yourself
fair of the
however
story
you
that
want.
you're in it.
But my point is that as soon as you're like, I'm seeing myself in the story, but it's all about my sexuality or my skin color, that's your goal, not the story.
But I'm okay with that.
You just want to
Like,
see yourself in
If some
a.
dude wants to fantasize about having sex with Fingon or whatever, you know what I mean? That's their thing. Like,
If they were like, oh, I see this illustration of Fingon and I think he's really hot and they're gay or whatever, it's like, okay. But if you're going into the story, creating an entire story, and the whole thing's literally just about you screwing somebody, then you're not there for the story. You're there to.
But again, I'm not
Yeah,
opposed to
Fingon,
that.
yes.
People have freedom to express whatever they want. My problem is when they say the original story is inferior because it didn't have this thing. You know?
Yeah, so and that's the issue with the word that they used.
I'm saying, like,
I
if
forgot what the exact one was, but it's repairing, right?
let's
Essentially.
just say a guy named Freddy is gay, and there's a couple of those. But let's say they're like, oh, I want to make a fan fiction where I'm in the story, and they're like, I want to serve under Aomir, and we're gonna go on, campaigns with Aragorn of Gondor, and we're gonna go, or King Elessar, I should say, and we're gonna go on. We're gonna either subdue the Runies or subdue the Haradrim and the Far Haradrim. We're gonna go across, reestablish the Kingdom of Arnor. We're gonna do all these things, and like he's gay, but it's not like it doesn't need to be mentioned. Like the whole reason none of this stuff is really mentioned is because it's not integral to the story. So if you do that, I don't care. Like your character could be gay, and in your secret time in your room, you're just going to town because you just really got off your rocks because of it. That's on you. But when you're like, I have to change this so every other sentence has some reference to pronouns or some reference to sexuality or gender or the behavior between characters, or it has to be explicit where it's not even implicit, it's just completely non-existent entirely. Your goal is those things, not the content of the story. You're not trying to add yourself into a story as a character and write a story about it.
My point is, I don't. Again, that's probably true. I don't have a problem with people doing their own. I have a problem with the people taking that position and saying, "Well, Tolkien's work is somehow need to be repaired because it didn't have that."
I get that, but what I'm saying is that people who do these fan fictions to put the intersex, to put the sexuality, the gender, to put their skin color or whatever into it, those are the people who are doing that. It needs to be fixed. We got to repair it thing.
Most of them aren't.
No. I'm not saying most of them are. I'm not saying all fan fiction is this way. I'm saying those who do fan fiction this way, that is what they are doing. They don't care about the story. They don't care that it's Middle Earth. They don't care about anything. They
I
just
think they see it's a subset of the people who are doing that.
Well, no, I would say
I know.
people doing this are Marxists who want to destroy the original work.
Yes, I'm not referencing fan fiction as a whole. I'm referencing the people who want this. I said explicitly, people who want to see themselves as gay, as lesbian,
Yeah, but even those people
They're
not
being used.
necessarily say, "Oh,
I don't care if
the
they're being
original is wrong."
saying their goal is not to enjoy or treasure the source material or even to add to it. Their goal is to just focus entirely on this. It's like, hey, here's the story about this one ring that got found by this little
one is
has to go
no
destroy
one
it.
would care.
No,
Like I
I've
said,
only heard about this dude shagging this other dude, or this girl scissoring this other girl, or
Yeah, but
all
the thing is,
these different skin tones. It's
no
like,
one would know or care about those people if it weren't for these Marxists trying to use them to destroy the product.
I know, but all I was saying, All I was saying is that when
It's
people
wrong, yeah.
do that, they don't care about the material. AKA, they're
Sure.
not fans. They're not doing fan fiction. They're doing fiction and trying to shove it into something because they want to sexify it or they want to deviantize it, whatever it is. I'm saying those people, the very small or large, I don't know what the exact percentages are. Those people don't care about Middle Earth. They don't care about Tolkien. They don't care about any of that stuff. They're not fans. They see something and they're like, oh, I have to go do X, Y, and Z, all things of which are not necessary to Tolkien's thing because he didn't add them. 2, they're going to be probably universe breaking in most situations. They're identity politics. They're not material politics, or like not material politics. They're not material source stuff.
Well, they're not the source of identity politics.
I'm not saying they're the source. I'm saying those are the people that they're trying to do it. They're not fans because their goal isn't to preserve Tolkien. Their goal is to subvert Tolkien.
No,
Like,
that's not their goal. It's the Marxist goal. Until these Marxists
I would say these people are probably Marxists.
no, most of them aren't.
No,
Most of them are just people writing these stories who want to live in only the world.
Socialists think that they're actually going to be able to do art and not have to work.
That's irrelevant.
No, I'm saying they're Marxists. They just don't behave like an actual Marxist.
No,
they
they
don't.
don't. Not all of them have the
They're
same
not
goal.
going to say turn and face wall and shooting people because they disagree with them. They believe in the concept of Marxism. They
don't even know what the concept
of
They
Marxism.
don't even know what the concept of Marxism is.
Yeah, most are just people that
They're just in a
don't
cult
know.
that says if the world was this way, you'd be happier.
So
The promise of the Marxists is if the world was our way, you'd be happier. That's essentially the promise.
that is a verifiable false.
Correct.
Yeah, but like you need to actually look for the verification. So most people don't do that, and so they hear, "Oh, good stuff. Yeah, I'll name in."
Trying to do is separate those who try to add to Lord of the Rings or something in the Tolkien Legendarium to fill out some cool adventures or something. Like you might hear a 3-sentence lines of, this is a cool concept.
No, I get that. But you need to make divisions.
Versus those who are just trying to throw in identity politics. They don't have any care or love for the material.
Yeah, no, I get that.
That's all I'm trying to do.
The second group is actually should be further divided into people who just want to put themselves with those things in that setting, or maybe are interested in 2 characters being slightly different than what they were.
I just like focusing on
the separate people who use it for activist reasons.
That's what I'm just saying. Is anybody who does that is an activist by default.
No,
they might not be a willing activist or an intentional activist, but they are an activist because they're trying to push something into something.
But they're not trying to push it. They just write a story for themselves
and then put it online. That's all they do.
I was gonna say they're not writing for themselves. They're putting it in public. They're writing it for people to read.
No, they're writing a story for themselves and sharing it. People do it all the time.
Exactly.
But I'm saying if they're doing it just for themselves, they would just write it and they would enjoy it. They don't even need to write it. They just have it.
If you do something fun for yourself and you think,
no primate does anything for themselves.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I eat for myself.
You also share stuff.
You eat to survive for your primate group.
I ask my friends. I don't really share food.
No, you eat because you want to be around your fellow primates.
No, but you tell your friends, "Oh, this
if
food."
I had my way, I wouldn't be around anybody ever, except online. I'm not a social creature like everybody else is.
You're married.
Wait a minute.
I don't know if I really had much say in that. Let's just say. But yes, I am married. And I can tolerate.
Someone doesn't watch this video.
I can tolerate.
You were married. You just see a shotgun come in the screen.
Let's put it this way: my wife understands that I do not like people because people are usually just terrible beings.
There's an old saying: Italian men don't get divorced. Italian women don't get divorced. Their husbands just disappear under mysterious circumstances.
Well, unfortunately for her, she's not Italian. So. But yes, I guess we'll just continue.
By this, we don't mean the artistic works that lie at the foundation of a culture, but the set of facts about a secondary world, in this case, Arda, that are accepted by the majority of fans as true of that world. While fan fiction communities vary in the importance they place on the canon, Tolkien fan fiction communities tend to highly value knowledge of the canon. Because Tolkien's canon is far from straightforward, details and interpretations enshrined by fans as canon often reveal whose perspectives are privileged in the stories created by a.
I wouldn't say he's not straightforward. He's pretty detailed. He just doesn't cover every detail about every little thing.
Well, okay, so what she's kind of getting at is if you really read everything Tolkien ever wrote, right, the Oasis Legendarium, as Christopher points out, there are like 7 different versions of everything at a minimum, right? Like I'm reading of Baron and Luthien, the collection by Christopher Tolkien, and from beginning to end, it's the major versions of Baron that he wrote over the years, right? And you can see it evolve, how it evolved. And Christopher dropped some notes periodically. He said, well, in the Silmarillion, I took some from this particular passage and that, and then combined that to make a more complete tale of the tale and all that. And so you could see, like, Tolkien, like, even when the 2 most finalized products in the Legendarium are obviously Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, right? Even those, Tolkien continued working on editing them long after they were published. So like there's a lot of, he was never satisfied with any of the.
He can post a revised version. I mean, I get that as a person who likes to write. I get the need to just constantly keep fixing what you've been doing.
Yeah.
But I also think, like, when it says 68% that agreed that they consider Tolkien's views on the canon in their fan fiction, I was like, there's 68 people who believe they do, but what percentage of that do they actually do that? Because that's the thing, is like, just because you see a statistic doesn't mean that that's the only statistic. There are other things that take position into that, because 68% can say, oh, I'm taking in his views on the canon, but I'm still going to do this, which would be objectively against that.
Well, no, sometimes fan fiction is about what if something was different from the canon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I'm talking about like inserting something that Tolkien would never insert, like same-sex relationships.
Well,
like
again,
say, oh, I'm putting that in consideration, but I'm still going to do this thing. But they would consider themselves part of the 68% that do believe that, but they aren't actually the people that do that. That's what I'm saying.
Well, again, 60. It just says 60% agreed that they consider Tolkien's views on the canon. Doesn't mean they agree with Tolkien's view on the canon.
Yeah, I'm not saying they agree with his view. I'm saying they took it into consideration, and they actually like made that part of like actively helping them build and mold the story. But then they threw in their other stuff that would be going against his views.
Well, so of course, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Is like there's a 68% that says I believe this, but then there's a 68% who say I believe this, but I'm doing this instead. So there's another percentage that we don't have access to, because I mean, every time you break down a percentage, you'd have to go in like a million different branches in different ways.
Well, this is just, again, we don't know. See, she's giving us a statistic, and like Mark Twain has said, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. What's that 68%? How is the question asked?
Yeah, and that's something I wish I could see. But
and was this her reaching out and gathering the data, or her team, or it's just a random poll?
Yeah, and it would have been better off as a random poll, but
no, you get more accurate data if you actually go find the survey.
Well, I meant like put in a poll in an area like a Middle Earth website or something. Hey, how do you guys feel about blah blah blah? And then go to a place that doesn't.
Yeah, but then you miss all the fan fiction writers who are not on that site but do write Tolkien fan fiction.
I'm not saying that's the only poll you do. You'd go to multiple places and drop the poll.
Yeah, but you need to make sure you have a well spread out.
It'd be well, I mean, you can't physically. You can only go to so many people, like in a time period for you to do it. So it'd be like
what you do is you hire a team of pollsters and you give them your list of questions and answers, and you have them call 50,000 people, however you can afford them to do. Then you get all that data and you have to analyze it and say, okay, how do I correct for obvious flaws, like too many Mississippi or whatever, like.
Well, I'm just saying, like, you'd put a poll on like Twitter, you'd put a poll on YouTube, you'd put a poll on Facebook, you'd put a poll on theonering.com, because nobody should touch theonering.net because it's trash. And then you should also go onto your like other main places, similar to like Wheel of Time would have.
Yeah,
like,
but that's not going to get you any scientifically valid data.
Well, it would tell you from people in those areas.
It's only the people who answer the question that can give you data from that.
Yeah, but that's the same thing for regular polls too. If they don't answer your thing, they're not going to be polled.
When you actively survey from a scientific point of view, the reason you can filter, and like if you, let's say you're polling for something in the U.S., right? You pay for them to call 50,000 people, proportionally divided by the states of the U.S., right? So then they call all the people in New York, and a far lower percentage of people in New York answer the question. So then you have to weigh the rest of your data relative to that percentage, so you get an equal percentage from each state of the population. So I did a lot of math. Like, it's been a long time since I did statistics, and what are they even like? The first class is like statistics and data analysis 1, I guess, or whatever you would call it. But there's a whole series of classes you would take in engineering to learn how to analyze data. And
yeah, I'm just saying that there are ways you can still get some accurate poll stuff.
I don't from a proper survey, yes. From a random posted poll, I personally would rarely, if ever.
I would say a thorough poll where it would have like 50 questions, and then
the problem is you only get people who volunteer to answer the poll.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get people. I never do polls ever. Like,
I saw one that interested me. That, like, if I'm a fan of Tolkien and they're like, here's a poll,
I'd never do them.
I'd be like, oh, well, yes, but you wouldn't do it even if they came to you in person, so it wouldn't matter.
No, I've participated in surveys before.
You literally just said you don't do them.
I don't do polls.
You don't do polls, but if somebody polls you through a survey, you do.
If someone does a survey for certain things, I've participated in them before.
That's what I just said. If it was a Tolkien one and I like Tolkien, I'd take the poll.
No, a poll is not a survey.
It can be, depending on the poll.
A poll is a very specific thing. It's a specific, right? A survey is a scientific study. It's not just asking someone a poll.
Maybe we're misunderstanding each other, because I'm saying basically doing the survey online in poll format, which is just basically like you put it up and then it has question after question after question.
It's not a survey if you just post it on some website for people to answer. Survey means you gather the data. You physically go out and gather the data. You don't just go to a bucket and pick up whatever falls in the bucket.
I kind of disagree.
I mean, I myself consider surveys to be questionable.
Well, then, I mean, in physics, you don't.
In
physics, surveys don't do much. But when in engineering work, when you need to do like certain types of qualitative analysis or whatever, or in IT work, when you do certain types of analysis, you need to have someone do surveys to get information about certain particular products and types. And say high-end physics or chemistry, for example, it's pointless. It's a pointless thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or I guess in the social sciences as well, or psychology or whatever.
It's also pointless.
I didn't take any of those classes. I can only answer from the engineering point of view.
Fan fiction about Tolkien's Legendarium has existed since at least 1957, and in the age of online fan fiction has become one of the largest, most prolific.
If I remember correctly, didn't Tolkien say he hates fan fiction?
I don't think so. Wasn't that Robert Jordan?
I know Robert Jordan does, but I thought when asked in a letter or something, he said he like absolutely hated anybody like changing his work or something.
Well, I know he doesn't like anyone. He is of the author who did not want people writing in his work. Yes, that's true.
Okay, so he didn't like fan
I know
fiction.
he gets really angry about a bunch of the adaptations.
So
messed up.
To put that into historical context, like in the time period when H.P. Lovecraft and R.B. Howard lived and others, like let's say from the 1900 to 1940, right? There was a big group of authors who came up who wanted to create collaborative worlds. Okay, Lovecraft's Legendarium is probably the most famous one. All sorts of other ones popped up, right? Conan, the Conan world, of the Hyborian Age, and a lot of authors reacted to that by saying, no, we don't ever want anyone touching our work. You know what I mean? It became a big dispute between authors from then on out, and because they were arguing that one would support because remember, fan fiction is a thing, like it's challenging a copyright to a lot of people, right? So legally, it's a challenge to copyright. So if you have a copyright on something and you don't tell, you have to have a public notice saying I'm not supporting fan fiction. I'm not giving permission for it. If you don't do that, you can lose your copyright by not defending it, by letting fan fiction proliferate. You know. So.
Yeah.
Fandoms. Due to its prodigious size and longevity, therefore, I want to offer the reminder that I cannot speak for every Tolkien fan fiction community, much less every Tolkien fan fiction writer that has existed across the vast breadth and depth of its history. At its peak in the early 2000s, there were hundreds of Tolkien fan fiction groups, some with thousands of members and others with just a few. It is impossible to represent the values and practices of them all. For this presentation, I have gathered information using two approaches. First is that of a historian. Some of the early Tolkien fan fiction groups are still online. Others have been archived by fandom historians over the years. I've gone back to those groups to see how members discuss gender, race, and sexuality. To capture a more contemporary perspective, I use results from the Tolkien Fan Fiction Survey, open to all writers and readers of Tolkien-based fan fiction, which I ran first in 2015 and again in 2020 in collaboration with Maria Alberto. So to return to the question at the heart of my presentation today, do Tolkien fan fiction writers use their craft to foreground the perspectives and experiences of marginalized groups? Tolkien's Legendarium, at least in terms of mainstream readings to this point, reflects much of Western literature and media in either excluding these perspectives, such as the lack of women characters, or relegating members of a group.
Do you guys think if something doesn't include something, it's excluding something?
I mean,
by definition, yes.
Yeah.
By the way that she's talking about it, no.
Including is the act of putting something in. Excluding is the act of keeping something out. I don't think Tolkien went in writing his story trying to keep things out. He just didn't include them because they weren't part of the story.
That would be correct, yes.
That would be the inclusion without exclusion, because he was not excluding, because he was not actively keeping. He's not like, oh, the gays, oh, the other races. Oh, he's not doing that. What he's doing is, I'm putting in what is necessary for the story. I'm building it.
He had many races in
Well,
Middle Earth.
Yeah,
what was necessary and to point of view, Tolkien thought was interesting and relevant to what he was creating.
Yeah, because he's like, I've got limited time, limited pages to put in all these different stories. I'm not going to just start running off about other things that don't matter. I'm going to write about what actually is part of the histories.
I mean, who knows? If he had lived 30 more years, maybe he would have filled out the stories about Helm's daughter that you know, he might have said, I'll go revisit that, you know.
We might have been able to see, you know, the Runies and the Harad and Far Harad rebellions against the evil rulers there. Like, we could have seen a lot of cool stuff that I would love to see. And if there's a fan fiction about that that's accurate to the lore, I'd read it. I got no problems with it. I know there are people who are hardcore and don't want to read it. It's like, fine, they don't have to read it. But if it exists and it's accurate to the universe, not accurate to the story, because obviously it didn't happen because we don't have anything written on it. But if it's something there, then that should be the case. But she's arguing like, oh, well, people are worried about the exclusion of their stuff. It's like, but no one's excluding your stuff.
Well, that's the whole Marxist thing. That point of view, whether she is the ones generating it or she is in the cult propagating it, is a deconstructionist and subversive point of view to destabilize and like tear apart something that's important, like Tolkien's work.
Yeah, and it's just, I find it like, I'm trying to remember the term that Metatron uses because I can't remember the term. It's like speech act or something like that. It's when you, like, the words you say and how they're said and what their intention to mean versus what people think it is. It's like if you were to read an old history book and it says a phrase, but the phrase means something different than something else is intended. He refers to this a lot in his like historical.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Where it's basically like somebody just reads and thinks, oh, that's what it is. It's like, but that's not actually what it means. It's a term of phrase. It's a way to speak. So like, for example, when I play MTG with my buddies and they're like, oh, I didn't attack you. I'm like, you killed 5 of my creatures. You attacked me. And they're like, no, I didn't damage you directly. I was like, but you killed my vassals. That's attacking me. That's how this works. That's attacking on me. It might not mean in MTG terms specifically.
Is
you
it?
didn't attack directly. Is it what?
Well, if it's not attacking you directly, I'd argue it's not attacking you.
No. Because in MTG, quick side note. In MTG, you can attack a person directly, or you can attack a planeswalker, which is like a secondary player that you can play. Or they
Isn't
attack.
the whole point of that game to fight someone else?
Yes, but what I'm saying is, it's like I can cast a kill spell on one of your creatures, so you don't have it. Strategically speaking,
Sure.
it's not attacking me.
But why would you complain that he attacks you then?
Because usually, if you have in Commander, you typically have 4 people, and it's political in nature. So you have standoff.
Okay.
I'm not attacking you. You don't attack me. We make like alliances.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. It's multiple people.
You have trade agreements. You have all this type of stuff because you're trying to benefit yourself without garnering too many enemies. You usually find one person to focus on as an enemy and pick on them, but you also have to defend from the other guys because if they gain allies from everybody else, then now 3-on-1 is a very bad thing. So if I'm not attacking anybody and somebody comes and hits my guys, that's what we would call an attack. Because it's my stuff and my domain that they're taking on. But in Magic the Gathering, they're only attacking me if it hits me directly. That's the magic term. But in speech, what they're actually saying is oh, I didn't do this. But in actuality, they did do that. Same thing in like Crusader Kings. If someone attacks your vassal that's in your territory, they're technically attacking you. The game might not allow you to do anything about it. But
they're attacking you specifically.
That's what I'm saying. It's like if it's like a vassal war between like a vassal and a vassal, and then they're taking territory from each other, but they don't allow the lords to be involved with it, kind of a thing. You know what I'm talking about? Like when your vassal just goes and gets land from other people, but it just adds in, but you're not actually actively in the war. It's just your vassal's doing it. That concept is like your vassal attacking their vassal is you attacking them. You just aren't directly commanding it, but it's your stuff attacking somebody else's stuff.
Okay, yeah, sure.
That's you attacking them without actually attacking somebody, if you will, in the Magic the Gathering sense. And it's just like, oh, I didn't attack you. And it's like you just swung an entire army at me. I stopped you. It's like, yeah, so I didn't attack you. I'm like, no, you attacked me. The action of attack was placed at me. I just prevented the attack from being successful. That's different, but it's still an attack. And so the term of speech being used is like, oh, well,
I mean, that's just deception.
Well, it's manipulation of words, but there's also words that mean multiple things. And I can't remember the term that Metatron uses for it, but it's like a term that has multiple, I think we talked about it. I don't remember if you remember that conversation, but
I mean, words that have multiple meanings are homonyms, I think.
Yeah, the homonyms, those ones where it has those, and then the other version, which is the one that has like this one term could be used in multiple different directions. Like you can use the word run as in operating a business or running with your legs. You could use like the spirits in the haunted house as alcohol, if they're saying spirits in the house, or you could mean ghosts. Like it's a word that has multiple meanings. So when they're saying include or exclude, we can like, no, exclude's not even in the picture because Tolkien's never actively trying to do any exclusion. He's only trying to include, and he's just picky about what he includes because he knows he has so much he's going to write, and he needs to have as much good information that's viable for the entirety of the story through the time period, whether it be the history through the Silmarillion or whether it be the histories up until Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, or even in those things, it's telling the story with the vital information. He could write The Hobbit with 8,000 pages and make it this freaking massive book if he wants to include everything, but he doesn't want to include everything. He wants to include the story. He wants to hit the story points. He wants to hit all the plot pieces. He wants to introduce the characters, flesh them out enough for you to understand and relate to them. But he's not going to flesh out every single character like the Goblin King or something. You only need to know very minimum for it because they're going to be there and poof, they're gone. Like they're not there the entire time. So you don't have to get to know the values of each of the individual characters. So the point is that when she says include and then there's an exclude, there is no exclusion. It's a false point. It's a false flag. It's not a thing, but she says it. And that's what I wanted to point out is that there is no actual exclusion in these stories. It's not excluding people of color. It's not excluding people of different races or with different sexual orientations or stuff. It's not excluding them because they're not inherent to the story and they're not necessary for the story. So they were just not included. That's not exclusion. that's not inclusion, because he's only limiting what he's going to do, because otherwise he's going to write for forever and never get one book done. Sorry, tangent.
Or to a stereotyped or caricatured role, such as an over-reliance on dark-skinned villains. There is a similar lack of queer and working-class characters. As Una McCormick discussed in her essay on reparative reading,
What?
fanfiction
Working class characters are missing? How?
Which class with?
Working class.
Well, obviously we don't have Samwise Gamgee.
Yeah.
This might be a real estate thing. Keep going.
A what thing? Oh, he's got another. Man, he's got so many real estate people coming to his door.
writers can address these shortcomings in several ways. First is to invent an original character belonging to a marginalized group.
I mean, look at these characters, because there's a Hobbit original character. And I'm thinking, like, okay, it's a Hobbit character, but it's not. Is that supposed to be Bilbo as a female?
No, it's an original character. It's a new one.
Well, it's got a ring around the neck, so that's why I'm confused. I have an original take on.
People can wear rings on their neck.
I don't think hobbits are really that big into jewelry.
Hmm.
People of the earth, they're not people of under earth, if you will.
No, I think there's a fair few ones.
Well, I'm saying, like, okay, this character smokes a pipe, is a female.
Yeah.
I don't know how many females smoke pipes.
Well, I mean, smoking a pipe is Hobbit, right? So that works.
A Hobbit thing, but we never see it done by females. It's
No,
never
because we only see Bilbo and some one
we have-
random party person.
we have Sam's dad when they're at the Green Dragon and stuff. They're usually men going
Fair
to the
enough.
tavern. Like we have those instances.
How many female hobbits do you remember from the book?
Rosie.
Okay, so that's one.
What was the question?
What's her face? Saxville Baggins's.
Okay, yeah, that's two, but that's an evil one, so it doesn't count.
Yeah, she's French.
Lobelia was what I was thinking. Sorry. And isn't there, I think there's another one from the Scouring, another one or two. One was like a really old lady.
There's some more female hobbits who are mentioned in passing. I think Bilbo's
Yeah, but
mother's name comes up.
we don't really interact with female hobbits a whole lot. So saying that because we only see male hobbits smoke pipes, that
yeah, but I'm
female
also looking
hobbits
at
definitely did
it
not.
from an English perspective. Like when you go to those quote unquote gentlemen clubs where like the English
Yeah,
guys,
okay, fair.
those are the lounges where they'd have cigars and stuff. Women didn't typically deal with cigars. They didn't
Yeah,
typically
but
deal with bourbon or whiskey or anything like
I
that.
get that.
That wasn't what they do. So I'm pulling his experience and how he would integrate it into his story. Would he have that be a thing for the female hobbits? I don't think so, because it's supposed to be like a traditional conservative type shire. Like it's
Well,
supposed
just if you only look at the source, right?
that's what I'm.
It's reasonable to think with just that hobbits like smoking. So if I
Yeah,
make it,
I'm saying, like, you know, between wolves and man like to eat this, but then it's like, okay, but does it mean man as the species, or does it mean man as like just men? Again, words have multiple meanings, so that's when you say hobbit, could you be referring to
assumption. I wouldn't say this is a bad character just because it.
I'm not
smokes-
saying it's bad. I'm saying that's what makes it, because it's short haired, which when the female hobbits would probably have longer hair, more so than the men.
Depends.
It has a ring. It's got a pipe. It's using a similar style vest system that would probably be seen more on men than on women.
Yeah, sure.
So that's what I'm saying. It's like it looks just like a female character version of Bilbo, like Bill Barbara or something. But I'm just saying that's what it has. It gives me the first glance. That's what I get the feeling of. I'm not saying that's what it is. It could be just a completely different character, but notice it's wearing pants. It's not wearing dresses.
Yeah, but that's because it's made by a modern person and they don't wear
They're
skirts
stupid,
generally.
yeah.
They don't know what those are.
Yeah, that I get that. I'm just saying, in that sense, it could either be a female version of Bilbo or Frodo, or it could be an original character that just is trying to use all the masculine traits as a feminine.
Yeah.
You got the minor characters, which is presumably Legolas and Gimli, but Legolas is dark skinned for some reason, and Gimli's brighter skinned.
Well, no, let's just hear what she has to say, because so far it's only been make an original character, and the others haven't been discussed yet.
Well, I know, but it says minor characters. Gimli and Legolas be considered minor characters because that's obviously a dwarf and an elf.
I'm not sure they would be minor characters exactly.
I think they would name main characters like Frodo, Sam, Aragorn,
Sure.
Gandalf. Everybody else kind of.
But minor character is different from a supporting character or a major character, because, see, right there, Eowyn is a major character.
They deem that to be a major character.
Yeah, but that's because minor characters are someone like, say, I don't know.
The person she marries.
The what?
The prince she marries. What's his face?
Faramir.
No, not the one she mentioned. The prince of Yeah, she marries Faramir, but Faramir's dead.
So a minor character would be like Théoden's a butler guy or whatever. How many?
She marries the prince, the prince of whatever, the one that
Eowyn marries Faramir. Boromir's the one that's dead.
Yeah.
Because remember, Eowyn and Faramir were in the House of Healing together, and that's where they fell in love.
No, well, the minor character is the Prince of Dol Amroth. That's the character.
Yeah, Prince Dol Amroth.
Sure.
Yeah. The Dunedain that travel with Aragorn be considered minor characters.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but not Legolas and Gimli. Those are major characters.
I mean, I would consider them major characters, but this image would be of an elf and a dwarf together in a friendly.
Yeah, this is just random. This is like Tower Down.
There's not many of those good.
That's like Robolas and Limley, not get Legolas and Gimli.
Yeah, these are just random.
A lot, that's for sure.
Yeah. So the left one is one of those 4 that came to the council, and he met one of the elves that also was there. So yeah.
Yeah, totally, absolutely.
Side characters.
That's what people writing fan fictions are writing about.
Yeah.
Secondly, fan fiction writers can develop minor characters who belong to, or who could belong to, a marginalized group. Finally, fan fiction writers can take a character who has a major role and center his or her perspective as a member of a marginalized group. For example, focusing on Eowyn's experience as a woman fighting in a war, or Samwise Gamgee's perspective as the sole working class member of the Fellowship. Historically, Tolkien fan fiction has undertaken this work most often
because Samwise is a gardener.
Yeah.
And everybody else is basically well-to-do and doesn't have to work.
Well, Frodo and Merry are certainly well-to-do.
Yeah, what was Pippin's background again?
Well, Pippin's a Took, and Tooks are pretty well off.
Well, all the hobbits are well off. I mean, even the poor hobbits are well off. It's not hobbits aren't poor. You know what I mean? Like.
Well, but I mean, some of them have to work, and others don't have to work. That's what I'm saying.
Sure.
Like Frodo doesn't work a day in his life, as far as I'm aware.
Because Frodo's rich beyond the dreams of avarice.
Yes, but I'm saying that there's other people like Merry comes from a wealthy family, so he's probably not working. He's always going around with Pippin doing stuff. Pippin's not out in the fields working. He's with Merry almost all the time, and when he's not, he's hanging out with Frodo.
Yeah, but Pippin and Merry are very young. They're like teenage hobbits.
Yes, they're not working class.
They may have been.
They may grow up to be. Well, at least they would have if they hadn't gone on the trip.
Like Pippin, I know Pippin wasn't the oldest born. He was like his second or third or whatever. And
the only one that has a legitimate job, not soldiering,
sure,
not of royalty, because Gimli's of a royal line, more or less. With his dad being a bigwig, lord, and then you obviously Legolas is of royal birth. So yeah, there's that. And then you have Aragorn, obviously royal birth. You have Gandalf, definitely not working class. He does it as a hobby.
Well, no, guys, we don't know what
Gandalf is basically like a hermit, right? He's homeless.
Well, we don't know what Pippin like. I don't think any mention of Pippin's lifestyle other than being a vagabond, teenage vagabond.
But we know that he's with Merry a lot. And if anything, Mary could be supporting his lifestyle. I don't freaking know. But we never get
Mary
any.
didn't enable you, Pippin. He enabled that fool of a took.
Basically, that's how it works. It's all Mary's fault. But we never see anybody other than Sam out of the original Fellowship doing labor.
Well, we don't see them go to the bathroom either.
I know, but the thing is we do see an instance of labor, as opposed to not seeing labor.
Because that's our introduction to Sam's character, as he's
I know. The
that's his
only
thing.
argument you have is that Perrin might be, but the problem is we don't see that it is.
The argument is we don't know either way for Perrin.
I know, but I'm saying is the only thing you can make an argument saying that Sam's the only one because he's the only one we actually see do work. He's a gardener. He gardens.
Sure.
Everybody else, we don't have anything either way. It's presumed with everybody other than Pippin that they don't. So if Pippin's a maybe, but we have nothing to back up that he is, it's safer to assume that he isn't.
It's not safe to assume anything.
But if you're going to make a claim, there's more supporting it that Sam's the only working class because there's no evidence supporting that Perrin is working class.
Well,
Yeah,
I
but
missed
that's
what claim
maybe
is he
because we only get
Is he making the claim that Sam's the only working class?
Well, it's because it wasn't excluded; it just wasn't included because it wasn't necessary for the plot.
Yeah.
But being a Took, I would say the Tooks probably aren't at the bottom of the Hobbit hierarchy because they're the Tooks. They're pretty
Sure,
well known.
But there's a lot of them.
Yeah,
exactly.
but I don't
And not
know.
all of them can be perfect in school.
But I wouldn't expect to see somebody who's working all the time to be hanging out with Mary all the time, traveling all the time.
Well, no, but Mary and Pippin aren't going to work no matter what because they're teenagers.
And then they're not working class. Even if they're
We don't
families.
know. I mean,
Well, that's
we know Mary is,
not
but
necessarily related.
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying if you're a teenager or a child or an infant, you're not working class. Even if your
Yeah, you
parents
if your parents
Yeah.
are working class, you're considered working class.
you'd be, your family would be considered working class. But
Yeah, and you're part of your family, so you're also.
she's
working
referring
class.
to working class. She's referring to a person who does labor.
No.
There's only one person out of the
No one
fellowship.
uses working class that way.
Well, when you look from a Marxist perspective, they're talking
No,
about the person-
also they don't do that.
The Marxist working class is everyone who's basically not part of the rich.
which out of the 9 fellowship, only 2 are not part of that.
Well, we
possibly-
don't know if Pippin and Mary are actually rich.
We
Mary-
know Frodo's rich. The only one we know is rich is Frodo.
Mhm.
Well, we know Frodo's rich, but we also know Mary comes from a well-to-do family.
Yeah, but he's like way down the line.
I don't know how far down the line it is, but it wouldn't matter how far he's down the line. If we're going to say he's way down the line, therefore he's not rich and thus working class, well, then an infant.
Bilbo
may
was
have-
legendarily rich. He's like the richest hobbit in history.
Yes,
okay.
his mithril could buy the Shire. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
I know that. I'm not.
No, but even
I'm
if you include that particular piece,
Like relative to Frodo and Bilbo,
I know.
everyone else in that Shire is poor.
I'm not arguing that Frodo is not rich. That's you guys are talking about something I'm not even mentioning.
No,
I-
but Mary and
Frodo's
Pippin.
not-
Okay, Mary and Pippin. We have no like we don't like you said we don't have any evidence that says that shows what they actually did for their lives, other than the fact that they were teenagers. So whether they were in the working class or the wealthy class, as teenagers, they're going to do nothing either way. Okay.
Yes, but Sam was doing actual labor.
But that's I agree with you. And
That's
but
her
that,
argument is that he's the only one who did labor.
sure.
'Cause she
Yeah,
used the
well,
word
yeah,
labor.
yeah.
So out of the 9, he's the laborer. And that's
Mhm.
why she said
Sure.
he's the full representation of the quote unquote workers class. It's the way she's using the word that's what's
yeah,
confusing.
but it's also in her way the mark of devaluing actual
I'm not
soldiers.
saying she's correct in using the term. I'm just saying that's
Yeah.
what she means by
Yeah.
when she uses the term.
Yep.
And she's probably wrong. But
Well, she's devaluing soldiery as being work. Soldiery is work too.
yeah, so the soldier profession. Yeah,
Yeah.
I get that, but she's also pointing out like Legolas doesn't have to be a soldier. Gimli doesn't have to be a soldier. Aragorn kind of has to be a soldier, mostly because
Legolas doesn't have to do anything. He's literally immortal. He can't starve. He can't freeze. He can't
I'm
get
saying
sick.
he's royalty. Gimli is basically royalty of the royal group anyway. He's like his dad's a lord. He doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to soldier. He doesn't have to go to war. He doesn't have to do anything. So he's on a whole different class than a laborer. He could, like, all of them are capable of laboring. They could all go chop wood and make coins. That's not the argument. The argument is which ones actually are of that particular group. Which ones are laborers, and that's what she's arguing for. Whether or not it's accurate, that's a different story. But as far as I know, the only one written of the 9 that does actual labor, and I say labor, not profession.
The only one to do like working class stuff would be Sam.
Yes, and that's what she's saying. He's like, as Sam as the sole laborer of the fellowship. That's her argument.
And for 2 groups,
it's the only thing accurate, at least so far, that I can see mostly for this book.
Groups of characters, women and queer characters. In both cases, the reaction of the wider fan fiction community has shown this to be a fraught endeavor, with responses all
because I want a fan fiction that literally just talks about all the people who work in the industrial complex, because that sounds exciting.
Well, she probably does.
Yeah,
probably.
I mean, wait, industrial complex? I don't remember that in Tolkien's world.
Exactly, because I want to sit there and I want to hear from the orc or these Southrons that are working for Sharky going about and saying, and here's how the engine system works, and here's where you put the trees into the wood chipper, and then they pop out.
A little story about the Shire and some random farmers there, I guess, could be interesting.
Well, the place you see industrialization is when you see the perspective of the orcs in Mordor. Tolkien was against industrialization, and he depicted Mordor, it becoming industrialized as part of it. We're not
talking about whether it's good or bad. We're talking about they want to throw urban working class presences into this. So by doing that, we would have to create story that focuses on that, even for a little bit, to hear about and learn about things that are not necessary for the plot to move forward, which is what we call filler.
Well, I'm saying Tolkien did include some of that in with the orcs, but you know.
Yes, but he was also trying to use that in a way to show them as evil. Like,
to show the society evil. He was,
but there was a purpose. There's no purpose in him going and saying, and here's Hobbit farmers. Like, there's no purpose to that. It doesn't help Frodo move the ring closer to Mordor. It doesn't help show anything. He can say,
that's why it should be fan fiction.
I know, that's what I'm saying, but that's the stuff that you want to put in. It's like, but the reason it was, they're saying its presence is lacking. But the reason it's
we know they're stupid, so it's like
yeah. But they're like, oh, we have to have females, so like because females did exist in the series and in the works. It's not necessary in every instance because it's not. Well, we need to check a box, and that'd be that.
Often outsized and mirroring the oppressive backlash faced by real-world members of these groups. Following the release of Lord of the Rings films, interest in Tolkien-based fan fiction exploded on the internet. One particular genre was so popular.
I didn't know about Lord of the Rings. Now I do. I should write fan fiction. I wrote fan fiction before. Now I'll write Lord of the Rings. That's how that works.
Popular, and it was given its own name, the 10th Walker story. In these stories, a highly idealized girl or young woman, often based on the author and called a self-insert, joined the fellowship on their quest. She typically attracted the romantic interest of at least one of the book characters, and this is where the story often focused. Authors of 10th Walker stories were typically teen girls. Taking in a wider view of Western storytelling,
also known as the worst of the worst when it comes to authorage,
none of this is terribly radical. After all, the idea of an ordinary, even underwhelming boy or man discovering that he has exceptional talents and using them, in many cases, to literally...
I like how Banner's in there, and I'm like, he's not even young in that picture.
Save the world is a common trope in stories that have commanded the adoration of millions of fans, such as Spider-Man or Harry Potter.
The difference is
one of those things is not like the other.
Which one?
The Matrix.
What about
Neo is not a young boy who discovers he has powers to save the world. Neo is basically like a Jesus, like a digital Jesus insert.
Yeah, they're saying like, oh, well, because these girls want to insert themselves into stories, these are all inserts. I'm like, but they're not. Like, J.K. Rowling is not a young boy with a scar on her forehead.
Well, what I'm getting at is she doesn't understand the stories of the images she's calling from if she puts Neo in there.
Yeah, I'm agreeing. But I'm also going a step further and saying none of these are self-inserts. They're just created characters by an author, but the author's not putting these in there so they can feel themselves in the story.
Which Ed Norton character is that? Is that Fight Club?
Yeah, I think that's Fight Club. It could. That's the younger version of him. They have Bruce Banner from what's his face, the jerk off, but for one, he's not young. But they were both Edward Norton and him were both technically Hulks, but I don't think that Edward Norton one's a Hulk one.
Potter. Nor are self-inserts inherently a byword in fiction. Many male authors write self-inserts to great acclaim. Tolkien himself wrote one. Finally, as a teacher who works with young adolescents, this is an age where
did Tolkien ever make himself like the one main character of the entire series in Legendarium? Because I don't recall that.
The closest thing to Tolkien's self-insert is Baron.
Yeah, I mean, basing a character off of him and his wife, sure. But like being the character, that's a little different. Because it's not saying like this is how I would behave or this is how I would act. That's saying these characters I created do these things, and
the only time we see scholars of ancient languages, which is what Tolkien was in the story, would be Elrond and Gandalf of the 2 published novels.
Yeah,
young people become
both of which are not the main character.
alive to the full breadth and possibilities of the world around them, while not yet fully cognizant of its limitations. Limitations too often prescribed by the demographic group they belong to. In other words, kids of this
imagine writing a story for a particular group of people that want to read your story. It's crazy, man.
Age dream big. Therefore, there was nothing culturally or developmentally unusual about the 10th Walker phenomenon in young women writers responding to a text they loved by making room to see themselves as characters with enough agency to shape the story. One would not have known it from the reaction of the broader Tolkien.
But it would literally cease to being the story if you shaped the story.
Well, they don't read books for the same reasons that we do. That's the best way to interpret that.
That's what I'm saying. It's this modern day lens needs to be destroyed really hard. Like, absolutely.
Well, no, I would say that it doesn't need to be destroyed. It needs to be not forced on other people.
No, it needs to be destroyed. People need to understand that when a story is written, it's for you to read and observe.
Well, no, the Marxists are the ones using that point of view to try to damage the original product. The Marxists need to be destroyed. This way, the people who want to do it
lose their power. That's my point.
No, but then the people who want to do this thing that we don't like can sit in their little corner of the universe and all be happy together. You know, instead of the Marxists trying to take their little community and use that to force all of us to destroy the product we all love.
Yeah, but a modern lens in itself usually damages everything that's not modern. And everything that we love and care and enjoy is typically not modern. Like anything from early 2000s is not modern.
But we agree with that. But the point I'm getting is that in order for ideas to exist, ideas you disagree with have to also exist. I have no problem with people who want to do
but the lens isn't a disagreement. It's an entire understanding of how things function.
Again, I have no problem with people saying what she's saying. I have a problem with the Marxists forcing what she's saying on the rest of us. We need to be very clear about that. I'm an intellectually. I would for the one. The Marxists have literally destroyed these people and made it so you can't even talk to them. You know, like it used to be when someone felt this woke crap, or whatever, like you could talk to them and say, oh, well, what's your viewpoint? This is why I disagree or whatever. Now, if you try to do that, they've all been convinced they're psychologically damaged and have panic attacks and shit over it.
But what I'm saying is that if you destroy the modern lens, you could just have bad stuff. You wouldn't have woke stuff. You just have bad stuff like it used to be. Movies used to be either bad or good.
No, but that modern lens has existed forever. It's just we only know because we have everything online now.
I'm saying most people groups, whether in ancient history or Renaissance, medieval, whatever, would have a view of the world, because they would look at it and say, well, how did these people do it? Like, I want to study these tactics of Alexander the Great. They didn't look at it and say, oh, that's
Yeah,
just
they
like
did.
Panzers.
Well, one of Nietzsche's big rants was about people doing this modern and millennial. You got, I mean, who else? Another philosopher I don't remember, for a couple hundred years before that also had a rant about that people would he opposed people interpreting things of the past in light of the present and that sort of thing. The concept of people doing that has been around a long time, but what happened is, before our modern era, you really didn't know about it, or if you did, it was like at college where you'll at university where you'll talk or whatever. Now, the last 30, 40 years, this critical theory, these Marxists, they've basically taken this one community of people, the intersectionalists, let's call them, right, and convinced them that their viewpoint has to crush our viewpoint because we're all evil and oppressing them and damaging them. They've destroyed their mental health, right? They've destroyed their mental health to the point that now we're in a war for survival with them trying to destroy the original product. And I always want to focus on the person causing the problem, which are these Marxists, who, when they take over, right, if they take over, they will crush these intersectionalists beneath their iron-trodden heels, because they will not want any disruption to their fascist oligarchy over everything. Try to put forth this nonsense she's putting forth in China. Any claim that Tolkien's Lord of the Rings is not exactly what the Chinese government says it is, you will go to the gulags. Okay, and you try to claim that Elrond was really queer or something in China, say that from the camps. You'll be in the camps within 2 days.
Throw it in the fist wall. What do you think, Sage? You're awfully quiet.
He's been brain damaged by her contentions.
He's been gaming. What are you joking about? He's gaming the entire time.
No.
I have way too well.
I can go 15 more minutes and I have to do a bunch of real world stuff before the other stream.
Well, we got like 13 minutes left of this, so do you want to just burn through it?
Yeah, let's burn through it. I will mute and
we'll try to stay silent until the end.
Fan fiction community. Here I want to give fair warning that I will be discussing threats of violence, suicide, and self-harm, often directed towards adolescents. If you're not up for this kind of content today, check back with me in about 2 minutes.
It's okay, Matt. It's okay.
Responses to these young women's stories were vicious and came from both from fans acting individually as well as parts of organizations.
I tried.
One such organization
I need to say this.
We couldn't even make it 30 seconds.
I'm a person who is, I don't know how to phrase it. I am in remission of mental health. I have mental health issues. I've been in remission. I've been through therapy. I've been on medication. At one point in my life, I struggled with suicidal ideation. Okay, people who do this, what she's doing, are offensive to people like me who have legitimate mental health issues and treatment. To take advantage of people struggling with mental health to put your ideology forward is evil. It's pure evil.
As is threatening somebody because you don't like their work and telling them to commit suicide.
The fuck is this?
I'm just focusing on the thing, because I'm a marginalized mental health person, so I could say it, right?
So are these guys writing stories when they kill Mary Sue characters?
Okay, I have to say this though. PPC's Department of Mary Sue's, in my head, a Warhammer mech walked up to the Department of Mary Sue's and bolted PPCs at it and blew apart in BattleTech. Like it's a BattleTech thing.
I get PPCs and Meta BattleTech, but what is a PPC supposed to be? Is it Protector Plot Continuum? Is that what it is?
Protectors of the plot continuum, probably.
I mean, what's wrong with the character, regardless of how it's killed? I don't understand. Like, if let's say Sage writes a horrible fan fiction of something that I care about. Me writing a fan fiction in response, destroying the character he created or liking, or putting forth.
That's just weird. Why would
that's called battle rap?
Yeah, especially saying I can write better than you and your character doesn't deserve to live, so I'm going to find a written way to destroy what you wrote without actually having to offend you directly, like saying you're stupid or a bad author or whatever. It's just like saying I wrote a fan fiction, this character, which came up in this other fan fiction, I'm hunting this character down actively and having them destroyed. They're like, you can't torture Mary Sue's. I'm like, why? They're a character. If you can torture anyone in a book, then you can torture Mary Sue.
I'm trying to be silent again.
30 seconds, guys. Go for 30 seconds.
Protectors of the Plot Continuum, or PPC, which still exists today, originated with the primary intention to mock authors of so-called Mary Sue stories, a term I'll discuss more in a moment, and that includes 10th Walkers. The quotes on the screen from the PPC's website show how their responses to these stories were presented in explicitly violent terms. While the PPC mocked many genres of story, the section of their website devoted to Mary Sue stories is the only section that uses this kind of violent language.
You can't have
And while
Black
the
Widow
PPC
assassinate
asserts the
people because
fictionalization
that's
of
like
their violent
assassinating
acts,
things.
it is significant that Mary Sue's are a genre where the author is the character targeted, and the female author at that.
That's not necessarily true.
I think they're comparing, or she's comparing, and the people who felt targeted are the ones comparing, like, if someone kills my Mary Sue, that is my self-insert and their story, that means they're threatening violence against me in real life, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. To be fair, it's also quite ridiculous, the Department of Mary's.
I find it actually more hilarious than anything else. It's
like funny, sure, but it's also ridiculous.
You're a bad writer and you should feel bad.
It's exactly funny because it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Other fans went further and sometimes threatened writers of 10th Walker or Mary Sue stories with harm and encouraged them to commit suicide. Again.
Now, did they say that to the character or did they say that to the person writing it? Because those people aren't okay if they're doing it to an actual person. But if you're just saying it to the character, it doesn't matter. It's just a character.
And recall that not only were these authors mostly children, mostly girls, but their youth was often held up as a rationale for attacking their stories, for the apparently grave offense of daring to place themselves inside a beloved literary work.
Oh, bother. Freaking hate this. YouTube needs to get a grip on themselves, like really, really bad.
Is she citing the bad Matrix movie? Oh no, there's the Spam Collide. It's the Spam Collide.
Yeah, we're gonna go back to this. Boink, 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 boink.
Phenomenon. Mary Sue is a generally derogatory term that originated in Star Trek fandom for an idealized original female character who exerted enough influence to reshape the plot or cause characters to behave out of character. In the early online Tolkien fan fiction community, the use of the term Mary Sue is interesting because of how it umbrellaed very quickly until it encompassed nearly any story that involved an original female character. The presence of an original female character alone, no matter how well written, could earn disapprobation as a Mary Sue. In reading back through message archives for Tolkien fan fiction,
if it's well written, you're not going to get called a Mary Sue. A Mary Sue by default is not well written. That's the whole point.
Groups in the early to mid 2000s, I encountered anxiety from authors who wanted to write more women in their stories, but feared receiving the dreaded label of Mary Sue. Authors who
then write better.
who did write women often took care to steer their characterization away from anything that suggested the traits of a Mary Sue, thus circumscribing
that's called good writing,
the options available to women in their stories, especially options that did allow.
The only options available are the Mary Sue options. I call crap on that.
Allow these women to shape the story. Another genre similarly subjected to aggressive scrutiny and attack in the early online fandom was slash, a genre of fan fiction where two same-sex characters are paired together romantically or sexually. Like Mary Sue, slash has its origins in the Star Trek fandom and was a genre with decades of history before fan fiction migrated online in the early 2000s. Like Mary Sue stories within the early online Tolkien fan fiction fandom, slash fiction was singled out for censure by other fans. Likewise, the canon was weaponized to
for fans of the series not okay with this. Sure, yeah, that makes sense.
Conceal essentially homophobic objections within the guise of.
It's heterophobic to put this in the characters that are not homos. It's heterophobic. Congratulations, you played yourself.
Okay, she's completely wrong. So she's interpreting people saying they don't like Slash as being gatekeeping. Okay, that you gotta remember what this Marxist witch is doing. Okay, she's trying to say
She's
she's trying to twist legitimate dislike for something, and therefore saying I don't like it, and or remember I was saying before, you used to be able to talk with people who disagree with you about stuff. They go and see maybe a conversation on a forum in the 2000s saying, well, I think this character is a Mary Sue. I don't like it, blah, blah, blah. And someone say, well, maybe I'm Mary Sue. I like blah, blah. They're interpreting you discussing it as being hostile to that person. That's what, and she's trying to force that viewpoint on us that not immediately accepting and saying it's great is hostility.
Newsflash: straight guys don't want to see dudes boning each other. Shocking. I had no idea heterosexual dudes didn't want to be homo. That's apparently homophobic. Wait, then isn't homosexuality heterophobic because they don't want to see dudes with?
But right here on her thing, Slash fiction was expressly banned by several major. It's fine. That's fine because they didn't want to have that. But she's trying to say that the fact that they didn't let it in is an attack.
It's also because a lot of sites are like, we need to keep this kid friendly, and you're putting in definitely not kid friendly content.
Well, not even that. That's the next level of it.
Like, I know, but I'm saying like not wanting some certain types of content on your site because of variant reasons that your website has rules and stuff. One of them is like kids. Like even YouTube has this with the whole COPPA nonsense, where they're like, you can't have this stuff showing up on like kid content because it's not for kids, and we're gonna get sued to oblivion.
Yeah, that's fine, but that's not the attack vector she's using. So moral decency requires a degree of tolerance to be able to interact in a functional society, right? So what she's saying is tolerance is evil. Like that we have to fully accept and embrace this Slash crap.
Intolerance is evil.
No, that tolerance is evil. That tolerance, just tolerating something is intolerance, is what she's saying.
Oh, okay.
In other words, if we don't fully accept and embrace this stuff, if we don't expose our children to this stuff, if we don't do this stuff, then we're evil. That's what she's saying.
Speak for yourself. I'm good.
Textual fidelity and respect for Tolkien. While also subjected to harassment, including threats of violence, Slash authors were often explicitly excluded from the mainstream fan fiction community. During this era, a time in U.S. history littered with record amounts of legislation excluding LGBTQ+ citizens from full involvement in family and cultural institutions, multiple large Tolkien fan.
A note somebody made one time was that an LGBTQ family can literally not exist because a family requires a hetero relationship from a natural scientific perspective. I'd like to throw that out there. That's just how it's defined and how it has to operate. It's like literally the nuclear family is literally how science and nature and everything deems a family. So by saying an LGBTQ family, you're literally just talking nonsense and something that does not exist. I don't make the rules. Sorry.
Archives banned Slash. Because of this, and because Slash authors tended to be older than authors of Mary Sue stories, with more resources at their disposal, within the early online Tolkien fan fiction fandom, Slash authors tended to form their own communities where they could avoid the harassment they experienced on other sites. The end result was a fandom where queer characters, including the very idea that there would have been queer characters in Middle-earth, went unseen by fans. In early online Tolkien fan fiction, canon was often wielded against interpretations that allowed for greater representation of diverse perspectives. The sexist underpinnings of the concept of Mary Sue were rarely scrutinized because the genre was criticized under the guise of canonicity. And the result was that many authors...
I thought it was, discussed under the concept of trash writing. Just saying.
Feared writing even women who were a canonical presence in the legendarium. The canon also experienced a sort of mission creep. For example, Tolkien's Catholicism, for many fans, became an element of the canon, Never mind that no character within the legendarium would have identified as a Catholic. That Catholicism also narrowed to what the most conservative
That's not
fans
how that
believed
works,
it to
but
be,
okay.
and allowed no room for Tolkien to maintain a complex perspective beyond his religious beliefs.
For those listening,
His
Tolkien
remarks
stated that the Lord of the Rings is
LGBT
explicitly a
became
Catholic
a matter of
work.
fidelity to the canon and not of homophobia, and could not be questioned on those terms. Again and again, what some fans thought Tolkien meant or believed he intended was elevated to the status of canon, where it was not open to question, and where canonicity became a convenient diversion from discussions of sexism, racism, and homophobia in the fandom. Once again, it is worth remembering the size and diversity of the Tolkien fan fiction fandom at this time in history. Certainly, there were communities that encouraged and discussed interpretations of the canon and stories featuring characters representing the full array of human diversity. However, returning to the academic view of fan fiction as a literature of the subordinate, as transgressive, as radical, as a means to amplify the voices and experiences of marginalized people, we can see that by and large, in the early online mainstream fandom, Tolkien fan fiction's tendency toward a definition of canon as conservative, in the sense of limiting rather than expanding possible perspectives, foreclosed on many of these opportunities. Which brings us to the fandom as it exists today. 2 decades after the release of The Fellowship of the Ring in theaters catapulted Tolkien to preeminent status in the early years of online fan fiction. Here I will turn to data from the Tolkien Fan Fiction Survey to gain a sense of how fans writing stories today use those stories, or don't use those stories, to draw forth diverse perspectives. First of all, who is writing and reading fan fiction about Tolkien's world? In 2020, Maria and I decided to expand out considerably the demographic information that we collected on participants. Some of that data is on the screen now. According to survey data, Tolkien fan fiction is largely written by college-educated, English-speaking young women.
I have to debate the educated aspect because obviously they're not doing so great.
Data on race and ethnicity was entirely up to the participant to define. As Maria and I designed the 2020 survey, including piloting it with other fans, we became increasingly aware of how our own definitions of terms like race and ethnicity were colored by our perceptions as researchers located within the US. We ultimately decided, given the diversity of fans within the fan fiction community, to allow participants to self-describe. As a result, the data for this item should not be seen as either or. For example, that 71% of fans included the word white in their response does not mean that 29% of fans are Black, Indigenous, or people of color. However, as the word cloud shows, Tolkien fan fiction fandom is predominantly white and Western. Again, because the fan fiction...
I believe it's called demographics, but yes.
No, because our poll was posted probably on sites where mostly English speakers, where people who read Tolkien in Africa or Asia probably never went because they have their own foreign language communities based on Tolkien. That's why polls are not good data.
I highly doubt only 23% do not identify as a part of a marginalized group. I highly doubt that.
U.S. understandings of which identities would be perceived as marginalized did not necessarily hold true. Furthermore, even within the U.S., the experiences of a single identity group are far from monolithic, and we didn't want to assume marginalization or lack thereof based on a participant's response to any single item. Therefore, we also allowed participants to identify if and for which identities they felt marginalized. I will also use these data to show how values and behaviors related to fan fiction vary among different groups of fans. Beginning with those previously maligned female characters, we see that in both the 2015 and 2020 surveys, authors expressed a high level of interest in using their fan fiction to explore the perspectives of female characters, the 2020 showing a slight bump over the earlier survey. However, while it is one thing to take on the perspectives of diverse characters, to what extent are authors comfortable, firstly, admitting that there are problems with how race, gender, and sexuality are depicted in the legendarium, and then going the extra length to use their stories to correct these problems? Here we see the number of authors drop off quite a bit, though I include 2 data sets here. The graph on the right shows authors who identified as marginalized.
I gotta go.
Among those,
Thanks, Matt, for hanging out.
So, guys, don't stroke out with the rest of this. Keep going after this witch.
I can make no promises.
Well, don't use up your you allotted stroke equivalency yet. Save that for another presentation.
Yeah. No, I'll try.
All right. Have a good one, Matt.
Stay safe, guys.
Later. All right. And then there were 2.
authors' reparative motives are far more comfortable and common. We'll see this pattern emerge again. When asked about using fan fiction to explore the perspective,
I'd like to point out that she herself is kind of killing her own argument, because anybody who does these is going out of their limbs to say, there was a problem with this writing and I had to fix it. Well, if there's a problem with the writing, then and that bothers you so much you want to go write a whole thing about it, you didn't like the source material to begin with. You liked a version of it that could suit whatever it is you wanted to go for, which I guess is fine. But you weren't a fan. You didn't enjoy the work. You enjoyed things that you felt could fulfill whatever weird kink you got in your brain, I guess. So that's silly.
the perspectives of LGBTQ plus characters, we see less agreement than the
How do you explore the perspective of LGBTQ plus characters when they don't exist in the universe?
By writing one in.
But would you not just go to a series that has them in it?
No. Because
I
you
feel
want them in Lord of the Rings.
No, you don't. Because what you want isn't Lord of the Rings.
Well, you might.
By default, you don't want it Lord of the Rings because you want the stuff that's not in Lord of the Rings in Lord of the Rings. And as soon as you put that stuff in Lord of the
Right.
Rings, it's
But you can want both.
No, you can't.
Yeah, you can.
No, you could think you want both. You could think you're getting both. But as soon as you make Aragorn gay for freaking Faramir or something, you cease to have any realization of it being Lord of the Rings. It's now a reskin on a poorly written crap piece.
Yeah, but see, that's why you don't do it with the major characters. You make OCs.
But even if you were to make OCs, now you're pulling away from the actual story, so you're not even following a plot line or a source material.
You do if you add your own character into the Fellowship, right? That's the whole tent walking thing.
And then the Fellowship of the Nine and the Fellowship of the Ring no longer are the Fellowship of the Nine or the Fellowship of the Ring, and thus not.
That doesn't fundamentally change the story. Provided, of course, your insert character is basically not doing anything.
That's what I was about to say. It's like, provided they aren't existing.
Provided they don't change the major events, it's basically the same, except there's now an extra character there.
Yeah.
same item about female characters. However, a majority of authors still agreed, and there is the same small bump from 2015 to 2020. When we look at Slash authors specifically, not surprisingly, almost all of them agreed with this survey item, which makes sense since they are by definition writing about LGBTQ plus characters. But again, among authors who identified as marginalized based on sexual orientation, the number who agreed with this item was significantly higher than for authors in general, suggesting that perception of marginalization motivates creating stories that represent groups in Middle-earth similar to the marginalized groups to which the author belongs. Next, we asked about race. Here, the numbers start to look different, though similar patterns continue to hold across the three categories of questions. Far fewer authors expressed interest in using fan fiction to incorporate the perspectives of characters of color. Returning to the earlier demographic data, this is possibly due to the relatively few fans who identify as parts of these groups themselves. Only 6% of participants felt marginalized based on race or color, compared to 58% and 41% for sexual orientation and gender, respectively. When asked about correcting problems with race, interestingly, more authors agreed than on the question about exploring the perspectives of characters of color. And once again, we see that among BIPOC authors, this number increases. Among authors who identify as marginalized based on race or color, the number increases yet again, until it looks more like the graphs for gender and sexual orientation presented earlier. Taken all together, the data suggests that authors often represent the experiences of characters like them, and especially when they identify as part of a marginalized group, they are motivated to not only represent those characters,
I would like to point out that, and this shouldn't be particularly controversial, but the more you have to see yourself in a story because you can't relate to the characters, you are literally turning yourself into less than human or unrelatable. Because when Aragorn has fear, do you as a reader experience fear? Yeah. What about if he has emotional thoughts?
Right.
No. You just when they have an emotion, you might not understand, like let's say Aragorn has a kid and the kid dies because in an orc raid. You can't relate with the loss of a child, but you can relate.
Yeah, no, but like for example, let's say Gimli might be afraid of getting thrown across a small gap, right?
He's not afraid of it.
Well, no, but he might.
Respectable.
This is a hypothetical, right?
Oh, okay.
That doesn't mean that you as the reader are also afraid of that particular scenario.
Well, yes, those are specifics. I'm not
Yeah.
talking about specifics. I'm talking about like when somebody is up against a big challenge, they have doubts. They are not sure if they can do this or that. They're not sure they have the skill or whatever might be required to overcome said challenge. Those are all traits that anybody who's reading should be able to be like, oh yeah, I'm the same way. I hit this big wall of a challenge and I'm not sure if I can do this. I don't know if I have the skills to overcome this challenge. Like all of these things are quite literally just traits that humans have. And you should be able to see those traits and say, I can relate. It's like, oh, well, I don't see my skin color on the character and therefore I can't. It's like, what? Like that has nothing to do with the traits because humanity's trait isn't skin color. Humanity's trait is how they deal with things, interact with things, and all that kind of stuff. Like the actual parts of them being human. A skin tone is an immutable characteristic that you can't change on yourself. You can probably change it for your kids. Like if you're a black guy and a white chick, you have a bicolor kid, then or a mixed kid, then that kid might not be as dark as you, and it might not be as light as your wife or whatever. Like, sure, but you yourself cannot just change your skin tone because anything you put on it would be like perfume or not perfume, makeup or anything like that. It's all a temporary thing. It's not permanent. You still have the immutable characteristic. You're just hiding it. You're muted, by the way.
I guess you could use like a tattoos to make it semi-permanent.
Yeah, but you wouldn't be able to do it naturally. And even then, it's under the tattoo.
Yeah, sure.
So, not really. Like,
but it might be indistinguishable if you have a good...
You cannot change certain things about your body and your existence in general. Like, your existence is an immutable characteristic. So, it's kind of a silly thing to be like, oh well, I can't see myself as a marginalized person through my race / color, or the fact that like, oh, I have 6 toes and that character only has 5 toes. It's like, but that's not something you need to relate with. You don't need to relate with how many fingers. Like, I don't watch Princess Bride and say I can't relate to the 6-fingered man because I only have 5 fingers. That's not how that works. I don't say, oh, well, I can relate to him because he's white. And it's like, no, that's not how that works. I can't relate to him because he's evil and I'm not. That's what you would do because that's a characteristic that the character has that is not immutable and can change. Like we have characters all the time. Like Venom starts out as a villain and then becomes an anti-hero. That's a change. It's not a mutable characteristic. He's not condemned to being a villain at all times. And even in some situations, he's a hero, depending on which branch of comics you read or something. But like Frank Castle as the Punisher is not an immutable characteristic that he has to go around murdering everybody. He does it, but he doesn't have to do it. He could stop literally at any point in time. If he decided his vengeance is over and evil has been vanquished, he could just be like, I'm going to retire now. He won't, but he could. It's not an immutable characteristic. Being angry when, like, for example, Treebeard seeing the forests near to parts of Fanghorn and other places around Isengard being burned out, feeling anger at the destruction of nature. Well, that's something any reader, regardless of their sex, gender, sexual orientation, whatever viewpoints on themselves, their skin color, or anything, everyone can relate to the annoyance or anger towards something natural being destroyed in favor of industrialization. Even people who are in the industrial line of work or something, are an employee for one of them, or even the owners. They're not like, I want to destroy the planet, and ha ha ha. Like, they go back and they replant trees that they cut down. They, mines and stuff they clean up after themselves so it doesn't affect the natural ecosystem. There's a lot of reasons they do it. Some of them might be for less than great reasons, others whatever, but the reason, like, anybody can be like, yeah, I don't want like just a horde of tree stumps everywhere, so we're going to rip them all out, we're going to use them for whatever, and then we're going to plant new trees because I want the environment to come back. But that's not what Saruman's doing. He's not growing it back. He's just trying to destroy. That his only goal is to destroy. So in that situation, it makes sense that, you'd be angry. Because that's what you would be angry about. If you love trees and you go out and you see them cut down, you'd be upset. Let's say when you're a kid, you plant a tree and it grows with you, and by the time you're like 50 or 60, it's a full-grown tree now, and somebody comes over and tries to chop it down, you'd be upset because you named the tree. It's part of your growing up, your childhood, your adulthood, your seniorhood, whatever. Like, why would you not be angry? Like, anybody can relate to that. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. It doesn't matter what your sexual orientation or your sex or gender is. None of that matters because it's not something that has to do with the character. The character is not a look like me. It's not a look me kind of character. Like, I'm trying to play off of pick me. It's not a look me character. Like, oh, look at me, I'm just like you, or I'm not just like you. That's nothing to do with the character. It's just saying, can you relate with a character that goes through loss? Can you relate to the fact that if you shagged your sister, not knowing she was your sister, got her pregnant, and then she commits suicide, and after you slay a dragon, and then you fall on your own sword because you're just distraught? Those should be things that you should be like, yeah, that would make me very distraught, possibly unalivable. Like, that's stuff you can relate with. You don't have to be that character. You just have to relate to the things that they're going through and empathize with them. That's it. It's literally it. This whole thing about like, oh, well, I can put this character in here because they look like me or they act like me. It's completely pointless. It's completely stupid. It has no purpose. You can still do it. Just do it well. But also try to fulfill the necessities. Like, if you want a person of color in Tolkien, be a Rhaenys, be Haradrim, that, I don't know, turns coats against their own country, joins Gondor, joins Arnor, joins the dwarves, joins the elves in some shape or form to fight back against the evil people in your nation, to reclaim your people from the evil people. Fight Sauron and his alliance to these places and break your country free. Those could be fun little stories if you write them well. It's literally that simple. But these people don't do it. That's why they're fan fiction authors and not just authors, because then they would just rewrite the story in different terms in a different universe and have all those things too.
Areas where the text falls short of complex, non-stereotyped depictions of diverse characters. Furthermore, it is important to consider these data within the fandom's historical context, which was not traditionally friendly to authors wishing to use their stories to expand upon the canon, much less correct it. When the implication is that
you can't expand the canon if you're not the original author.
And you can't correct it if you're not the original author.
And also, yeah.
Legendarium. Stories that explore gender and sexuality could have been passed over by readers uninterested in the subject or who felt uncomfortable or disagreed with the implied critique of Tolkien. Instead, authors of these stories were subjected to the kinds of harassment, including threats.
Imagine somebody destroying something you love and cherish and trying to promote it as something
like,
really...
say, on the Rings of Power or the Wheel of Time show or a lot of other stuff.
Yeah. Imagine you making something that people didn't like, and the way you made it bastardized everything they cared about. Yeah, it's because they have empathy towards the source material and they care about it. It plays a massive role in their life.
Though, to be fair, this is more the case for adaptations rather than fan fiction.
Well, yes, but fan fiction is also not mainstream.
Yeah, exactly.
That's Rings of Power and Wheel of Time Season 2. or 1 and 2.
Okay, fair point. But that's fan fiction fused into the adaptation.
I would say it's more fan fiction, less adaptation, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's marketed as an adaptation, but it's actually fan fiction.
Fraud still exists, dude. Fraud still exists. But I would say, if I read, like, for example, if I read that story,
the problem is when fan fiction is pushed as the actual thing.
well, I mean, not necessarily. Like, if you're saying it's a continuation or something like that, and you just do a poor job of it, people are going to be like, that wasn't that great. But if you're putting stuff in it that blatantly contradicts the source material, like LGBTQ or multi-race ethnic people in areas that are very homogenous, they might have a problem with that and be like, yeah, this is crap. Why are you doing this? Stop doing this. I don't think anybody should say go on live yourself, but they're not going to be happy, probably. Like, threats of violence or telling somebody to try to encourage them to do something harmful to themselves is never okay. But just because you write something as a fan fiction, if you put it in the court of public opinion, be prepared to get roasted for it. Like, anybody who does that, anybody, that'll happen. So if I write a really poor fan fiction of Lord of the Rings, I'm expecting to get demolished. Even if I don't have LGBTQ characters, even if I don't have multi-ethnical characters, even if I don't have all this other stuff in it, if I'm not using a modern lens, I'm still expecting to get roasted. None of this minority marginalized nonsense has anything to do with it. It's just a fact of it's not good. It's that simple. But if they go and they do make that, that Runi's or Haradrim story that I was mentioning earlier, if they go and they make that and it's good, people are less likely to complain about it. Now, there's going to be the hardcores that will complain about it because it's not the original source material. It's like, okay, but that's just an opinion. But they're not going to be going in there and being like, oh, stupid, this, that, or the other, and being like a phobe or something. Like, that's not necessarily going to be the case. But you're also not necessarily putting in anything into it. Like, if somebody goes out and does a Wheel of Time fan fiction that manages to survive not getting sued, I'd love to see more about Matt and his adventures. I'd love to see him do stuff with the Band of the Red Hand. I'd love to see him become a powerhouse that rivals Tuon or Fortuona. Like, I would love to see that kind of stuff. I'd love see him and her have like a marital dispute and it is played out on the battlefield. He wins and then she has to deal with it. Like, that would be hilarious. That would be great. His character would only improve. But going out and saying like, I want to make Matt gay, or I want to make Tuon / Fortuona, I want to make her white so I can relate to her. Like, no, don't change the immutable characteristics. Don't change things that are not part of the source material. Don't change the context of the entire series or the work or whatever it is. Just make everything fit inside the boundaries of it. That's literally the only thing you have to do. Make it fit. And as long as it, like, if you have Matt leaving after the last battle, joining up with the Band of the Red Hand, going drinking in taverns, he's not himself going to be dandling girls on his knees, but he'll, look for Tomanis, like, he'll go drinking with Brigitte or whatever. I think she dies if I recall correctly, but whatever. Like, if Brigitte was around, if she hadn't died, he'd go drinking in the taverns just like he did before, because that's stuff he would behave. He's like, I'm not ready to be in a long-term like, they're married, but there's no like wedding ceremony. There's no, anything like that. But that would be okay because you're seeing stuff as it would have continued on if Robert Jordan had it, or at least a potential as he continued on if he had continued on. We will never know, but I wouldn't have any problems with that. I would never say it's canon. I would never say it's the way it was meant to be, but I would say I could at least enjoy it because somebody of that
Sure.
writing caliber could be fun. Like if Brandon Sanderson went out and he's a well-written type of author, like he's a good writer, he understands things. He may not be Robert Jordan, and he may not understand Jordan's world to the extent that Robert Jordan understood it, obviously, because he's not the original author, but he could still do a decent job, and he could still put out some stuff, and maybe it's still really good. I don't know. But the fans don't have to accept anything that Brandon Sanderson puts out after the 15 books that are out as canon. But I don't think that necessarily means they shouldn't exist. I may not like them or whatever, but I'd be like, okay, put them out. I'm not going to buy them. I see no value in them or anything like that if I don't like them, or if they're not part of they're not following the universe canon. But I feel like Brandon Sanderson, of all the authors, I mean, maybe even J.K. Rowling, I know she's a hot topic, but if she writes more Harry Potter stuff, you'd imagine she'd write more Harry Potter stuff that fits the story in the universe. She wouldn't just throw out weird random things that make absolutely no sense.
Like say a time turner that could turn you to many years ago, and then do the split timeline story sort of thing. That
time travel. I don't know. Yeah. I didn't read any of your books, so I don't know. But
no, this is me criticizing the Cursed Child.
I was thinking that's the only one I know that's not really that good. But she didn't write that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I wouldn't. I don't consider it canon.
Mm-hmm. It's
Even
not.
If she came out and said it's canon, I still wouldn't consider it canon.
Yeah, because it's not.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is it's not. It does. It has too many issues in it, and I've heard that from people who love Harry Potter, and I've heard that from people who hate Harry Potter.
Yep.
But they all agree it's not that good. So
it's
that makes
actively
sense.
terrible.
Yeah.
The violence and exclusion that often mirror real-world marginalization of the groups they were writing about. As I noted, canon was weaponized in these situations and used to silence criticism of fans attacking authors who wrote about women or
canon should always be weaponized to support canonized works and source material. It's called gatekeeping. You're not preventing people from reading it. You're preventing people from changing it. As we've seen with the Star Wars Acolyte
We're
Wikipedia.
preventing people from conquering it.
We're preventing them from colonizing. That's fantastic.
Yes.
They're pro-colonizers now. It's great.
LGBTQ plus characters. Those readers objected to distortion of the canon, not to the presence per se of women or queer characters.
Not per se. Well, they are part of the screwing up of the canon. So yes, they are. They are, just not because that's who they are, but because that's who they are. It's not like saying I hate queer people, therefore I should, be against your thing. It's saying these people don't exist. This did not happen. It's actively anti the canon. That's why I don't want it. That's reasonable.
Or characters of color, they said. Never mind that their definition of canon foreclosed upon any opportunity for meaningful inclusion of those characters.
They're trying to include something that was not excluded, but was not included.
But it doesn't have to be this way. Part of Tolkien is that he crafted the Legendarium to always invite readers to journey imaginatively beyond the people, places, and perspectives that received his focus. When Aragorn mentioned strange,
explain.
Because he wrote it specifically to have the story, not to make sure people could just sort of do whatever they thought made sense outside of the bounds of the story.
He wanted to create escapism, but he didn't want to create a roll your own adventure work out of a static work.
Exactly, that is D&D.
And in D&D, and that's the same thing. Like, if I have I play Magic the Gathering. I mentioned that earlier in this episode, or whatever this is called. Is this considered episode? I guess. I don't know. What is the video? This video.
Yeah,
I have an elf deck, but I refuse to put any of the Middle Earth elves that have been altered in it, because there aren't those elves in that. Eowyn is not black with white dreads. Aragorn is not black with short hair. Like, they're not those characters. But I have black elves in my deck because I don't care if there are black elves in my deck that are in the universe in which they are normal. I have no problems with them. Numa is is basically an elf chieftain. He's a black elf. Cool. In
Sure,
the
I have no idea what that is. I don't really care either, but fair enough.
I'm just saying, he's a legendary character who can be played as a commander. I play him as a commander. He's fine. I like the guy. It's just in his universe, that's normal. Cool. In Tolkien's universe, it's not. Therefore, not cool. Because I want accuracy. I don't want bastardization. I really, really don't want people going in with an agenda to do something. Like, if you have a black version, I think there's a black version of Mary and there's a white version of Mary. I'm like, you can't even keep it straight, guys. Pun intended. Like, you have two Marys that are literally two different races in the same set because they're done by different authors who had different takes on them. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. You can't have both be in the same timeline. That's not even continuity aspect wise. Like, but if somebody wants to go in and play an LGBTQ plus racially marginalized character in D&D, no one literally gives a crap, except maybe the DM if they don't want any romantic relationships. In that case, you're kind of just screwed. But that's rule for everybody.
A good rule, maybe.
Oh, it does speed up the game, but that's on the DM and the group you're playing with. That's not a rule of D&D. But maybe somebody doesn't like your character because your character is really snobbish and egotistical, or talking down to them all the time because you're playing yourself, and that's not what you should be playing. Like, when I play D&D, I don't play myself because, one, that's boring. I do that every day on a regular basis. Why would I want to do that in a game? But I will see how I would feel or react in a setting, and I create a character that's not me, because obviously I don't fight dragons. I don't know how I would react when I fight dragons, but I would create a character that I could probably insert myself into and say, okay, how would I act in this situation? Or I could build an entire self-personality of its own and then just follow the path of logic. This character would do this in this situation, would not do this in this situation. They're a coward or they're brave. They're stupid or they're smart, whatever it might be, completely separate from myself. But that's what you're supposed to do. That's what literally makes it escapism. It's not escapism if you have to see yourself in everything. Then you're just, might as well just go outside and touch grass and be like, yeah, I'm me. I am the queer, this, that, or the other. I am the multi-ethnical person. I am the singular ethnical person, whatever it might be. Congratulations, you're your D&D character, I guess. Going to work is a D&D job. Fighting bullies in an alleyway or like Daredevil or Batman or something. Congratulations, you found your profession. Like, do whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter. So,
Tolkien expands his map for readers who wish to see and see themselves in those lands. His
balls. That's not why he does it. It's a place for you to escape and a universe for you to feel different about. That's what it's for. Nothing else.
presentation of his work as historical artifacts invite the reader to imagine those same people and events seen through other eyes. These devices and details.
If you're literally making self-inserts all the time, you are lacking in imagination so freaking hard.
Are equally canonical, maybe even more so than those used to exclude diverse fans who imagine the Legendarium has room for them, as it does.
It's not excluding them, it's just not including them. We've covered this once, twice, 1,000 times more.
Survey data shows that Tolkien fan fiction writers still hold an immense regard, almost a reverence, for the canon and often for Tolkien himself.
That's good.
Yeah. Yes, they should, because he was a great author. He was a great linguistics person.
A linguist, yes.
Yeah, that one. All the words. I blame it on the fish. But
that's fair.
there's a lot of things and a lot of reasons as to why he should be revered. All of them are valid. And if you don't like that, I'm sorry, but you don't like him or his work. That's literally how that works. Pun intended.
It is through a fuller understanding of what that canon includes and who it invites into the stories it tells that has begun to evolve.
It doesn't invite you into the story, it invites you to observe the story. That's how stories are written, historically. When you read a newspaper about World War II battles in, let's say, 1943 or something, you're not putting yourself into the story of what happened by Private David, who goes out and kills a bunch of Nazis by himself and holds a field solo with just a sniper rifle and a pistol. That's not you. That's him. He's a real person. Well, in the stories like this, these are quote unquote real people in a quote unquote real world that was created by the author. You can't just go in there and dismiss them because you don't like it and you want to be the person in it. It's like, well, then go write your own story. You do. It's called fan fiction, or it's just a regular book, and it's trash because you're not going in for the story. You're going in for self-satisfaction, and that's not what you should be writing for.
Thank you.
You're not welcome.
All right, questions.
That was fascinating. Thank you so much, Dawn,
He's back.
for a further bringing a further component into.
What was that?
I have no idea, and I don't really want to know either.
He probably was sitting on his butt plug.
Our seminar and greater topic as well. So a fascinating insight into the world of fan fiction. Now,
I would say yes, but really no.
we do have a range of questions, so we are going
10 minutes of it.
jump straight into them. Okay, so our first question asks, do you feel that Tolkien fandoms still choose certain platforms for their work based on the likely reaction of fanfic communities to them, or does the homogenizing of the internet mean most writers post on the same few sites?
Imagine trying to post to a group of people who don't care about your product.
Yeah, you would get ignored, I guess.
You might pull a Disney.
That is a great question, and it gets to the heart of one of my interests that I didn't talk about today, which is what I call the fandom infrastructure. So the different sites and archives that Tolkien fan fiction writers use. So traditionally, when we go back to that early mid-2000s, there were literally dozens of archives and hundreds, if not thousands, of smaller groups on what was sort of early versions of social media, like Yahoo groups, LiveJournal, and so on. We have definitely seen a lot of those die in recent years. Most activity now, based on the 2020 survey data, occurs on an archive of our own, also known as AO3, and Tumblr.
Our own.
There's still a lot more.
What?
She said most.
You cut out for me. I can't hear anything you're saying. And you're gone. Oh my gosh. Well, that's about par for the course for European quality. We'll give him a second to come back in. But I don't think that having your own, how do you say, having your own take on something is different than expecting everyone to enjoy your content. That's the easiest way to say that. It's very, very easy for people to not be okay with what you created because they don't like it for literally any reason whatsoever. They could be bad reasons, like phobic or whatever, but that's only if it's legitimately phobic. It's not if you just did a poor job writing, or you're destroying the universe through your own means. That's not phobic. That's just you're a bad writer. If you're going beyond the bounds of your position, so to speak, I would consider that not valid. So, she has a very strange way about this. Let's see if he comes back. Welcome back, sir. All right.
Mm-hmm.
You were saying?
Yeah, so she was talking about where the fan fiction is on the internet, right? And she specifically, I recall, mentioned that most of it is now on our archive.
The AOL or something like that?
Um,
Was
She-
it I or AOL? I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know the specific details of the way. But I'm he is one such fan fiction writer, or just someone who is happy or something.
You're kind of cutting out, by the way.
Oh, well, could be bad internet, I guess.
Could also be your mic's like out here. instead
No,
of
that's normal. That's always the case.
so you're always verbally speaking. Okay,
No,
it's just your EU Parliament is trying to piss all over you right now. I guess.
yeah, let's go with that.
Anyway, as long as I can hear you, because you were like cutting out because you were really quiet or whatever. So go for it. Just talk. You should be fine.
Yeah, but I finished talking.
Oh, you finished? Okay. Well, enough of you then.
Diversity, I think, in the Tolkien fan fiction community than there are in other fan fiction.
Is it just me or does she strike you as a Karen?
A bit, I guess.
Strikes me as a Karen.
Fiction fandoms. I'm kind of a prime example. I founded the Silmarillion Writers Guild, which is a fan fiction archive for stories based on the
Yes.
Biased. I see.
Silmarillion
Okay.
back in 2005, and we are still going stronger than ever. And there's some
How many things could you possibly write? Like it's a preset era. You can only write so much in it.
Well, I suppose you could write infinitely much, but the quality will go down.
Or are they like individual versions of a multiverse or something?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, it has to be because it's multiple fan fiction writers.
other Tolkien-specific archives that still exist out there, as well as other options for multi-fandom archives such as Wattpad and fanfiction.net that people, especially fanfiction.net, receives a lot of posting from people. And they do definitely self-select where they post. I've done quite a bit of writing on this for anybody that's interested in diving deeper into that question. Fans definitely self-select where they post based on the culture of those communities.
Right. So
there are some communities that are more
times.
Repeat what?
She repeated 3 times. Yes, fans still self-select where they post. And then a bit later.
And
Yeah,
where the
of course,
thing
selection is definitely a thing for fan fiction writers.
I mean, it's
et
also
cetera.
for the fantasy fiction readers. They choose where they
True.
want to go to consume. They go to places they hear as
Almost.
comfortable.
Right. Almost as if the writers seek out an audience that wants to write their things. Wow.
Wants to write their things. You mean read their things?
Sorry, read. Yes, sorry.
I'm a fantasy fiction author. Fan fiction author. I want you to write my stuff.
To be fair, that would be very useful.
I mean, probably better, but yeah. I do think it's funny though, because like you're gonna post where you think your content will be welcomed. So you're the limitation of your audience. Your audience is limited because you don't post in places where other people would be at. And if they don't come to your area, well, then they're not going to read your stuff. That's how that works. So I don't know. It's just...
You might actually be excluding them, you could say.
You're actively excluding your audience. Ah! I would say that they're just not including, but they are actively not including. So that would be excluding.
Writing about women or other marginalized groups of characters than others, and fans.
Oh, but if you write a woman or a marginalized character, you can't kill them or torture them or anything because they're a Mary Sue. I don't know why.
It all works.
Well, that was how the PPC Mary
Yeah.
Sue. And it's just like, if I'm going to put them in the clutches of a villain that's going to capture them and torture them for information, they got to get tortured.
Well, they could also just give the information before getting tortured, I guess, but
that's not what a Mary Sue would do, so they couldn't.
No, but the Mary Sue would be so perfect that she somehow deceives the guys into thinking that the information is correct, but it's actually deception.
Well, she would attempt. Remember, this is somebody else's story about your Mary Sue.
Yeah.
But, like, it doesn't make sense. Like, you could put a warning and say, warning, there's going to be torture, there could be rape, there could be all these horrible things, but that's part of storytelling. Like, when, like, for example, Wheel of Time, because why not go there? Padan Fain grapes a woman and her daughter before giving them to Myrddraal.
Yeah, lovely.
Not exactly a pleasant experience for anyone involved. But it lets you understand he's a horrible, well, I would say person, but he's not really much of a person anymore. But he's a horrible being. He's a horrible entity. He is a thing that is not to be praised. He is not to be glorified. He is not to be emulated. He's a bad dude. That's the point of that. If he went through the entire thing and all he's doing is, I'm going to get you, Randall Thor, and then never does anything bad, you wouldn't say he's a good villain because he didn't do anything. He's got to do villainous things to be a villain. That's basic logic. Can't have that, apparently. But I digress. That's the kind of thing that makes sense in writing, but you can't do that because it's phobic. What if Padan Fain was anti-woman, was misogynistic because he raped a woman and her underage daughter?
Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, you'd be like, oh, he's a misogynist. You'd be like, and a murderer,
And
a
also
rapist,
something else.
and evil, and violent, and a villain, and not a good guy. The list goes on. I mean, we say the same thing about Tylan. Tylan raped Matt. What are you going to do?
No, that's actually impossible.
That's not, women can't grape men. What? You obviously haven't met very many women. But we don't go and say, be like Tylan, emulate Tylan, do that to men. No, we don't. We condemn that just like we condemn everything else. But we also see it from the viewpoint of Matt, where Matt's not against the sexual act with Tylan. He finds her attractive for her age, and he enjoys, obviously, the copulation aspect. But he doesn't want to be the one being chased. He wants to do the chasing. He finds it unnatural. He states this in the book series. It's unnatural. I should be doing the chasing. But because she's in a dominant position of power, it's also seen as an abuse of power because she's using her power to track him down, drag him back, tie him to the bed, and do what she wants with him. She's abusing power. She is graping him. Now, if he consented to it, which he does for all intents and purposes, consent to sex, he just doesn't consent to being chased. And I don't mean chased in terms of like no sex. I mean chased as in being pursued. But he doesn't consent to that. But in terms of like, if she had gone about it differently, if she tried to seduce him but play a little hard to get, and he felt like, ooh, I can chase her, and he chases her. All of that would have been normal copulation habits and events and everything else. Like nothing would have been bad. But that's not what she did, and thus she did bad things. You're not supposed to emulate her. You're not supposed to glorify her. You're not supposed to give excuses for her. Just like if it was a man doing it to a woman. And there was a power struggle in the same way, but obviously the man being in power and the woman not. It's the same way. Both issues are bad. That's the whole point. It's the whole point. They don't see it because women can do no wrong or women are marginalized. Other people of color or whatever are marginalized, so they can't do any wrong. You're not writing anymore. You're being an activist. That's all it is. That's why I don't think that none of these are activists. I don't think they're being used by the Marxists. No, they're fully on board because they're doing it, and thus they are activists.
Definitely choose where they post based on their interest in that, among other areas.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Our second question asks, what percentage of respondents?
Like, and then they tear her head off and stuff it in with homophobia. And it's like, wonderful, terribly interesting.
Indeed, quite.
Race as their marginalized status indicate the seemingly obvious conclusion that the legendarium is not appealing enough to people of color.
I call BS. There's nobody I've been able to find that read The Lord of the Rings that is a person of color or of a different ethnicity or of the same ethnicity or anybody anywhere that's like, I tried reading this, but I can't relate to it because I have a different skin tone. Like, it literally was the best-selling book in how many countries? 90 plus countries?
Don't know, didn't count.
Well, let's check. Solve that problem really quick, won't we? All right. 150 million copies sold. Approximately. They're not saying anything. Worldwide. So apparently, at least as of 9 years ago, it says, I remember watching a documentary about Lord of the Rings, and it said Lord of the Rings was the second most read book of the 20th century behind the Bible. So pretty big. The book has been translated into more than 50 languages, including Indonesian. Well, there's a people of color territory if I ever saw one. Oh, apparently, as of 3 years ago, J.R.R. Tolkien novel sales passed 600 million. Like,
Yeah, that's the number.
Blah, 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 blah. No, this is Reddit stuff. It's gonna be very, very, very specific to Reddit, so I don't know how true that's gonna be. Let's talk about the Lord of the Rings entering public domain soon, or something like that. I don't know how that works, but yeah, that's 50 languages, and some of those languages are in multiple countries. So multiple countries can read that language of some sort. Like English, for example. English can be read in a lot of countries because English is taught in a lot of countries. Like, English is usually pretty pursued as a form of education. Things like Japan, Germany, I believe like Norway, lots of part of Europe, obviously England. and a lot of places elsewhere in the world. Like you can go to Israel and do that type of stuff. You can go to Greece. You can go to Italy. You can go to, like, I'm not saying that they speak it fluently everywhere or that they're, going out of their way to like try to learn it or anything necessarily in every place, but a lot of places, like I think Korea, Japan, they have like classes in their school system to teach you English because English is such an impact through trade or companies and stuff like that you might work for that has a base there of operations. You need to be able to understand what's going on in the context of all the different things, but also because those places also are big fans of European or American culture. But be as it may.
I have been, that's another great question because I've been mulling over since I ran this data. I've been mulling that over because I looked up some census data for the US anyway. And of course, we're dealing with an international community, so it's really often impossible.
We're dealing with an international community and we're going to disregard all the international community that are non-whites.
Yeah, let's look only at the US census data. That's a good idea. I don't know.
Yeah, Matt would be furious about this. So Matt, when you watch this, because you're going to watch it, you are, you better leave a comment.
To quantify and compare in ways that are fully accurate. But within the US, 40% in the last census apparently identified groups other than white. So the fact that we're only getting about 13% of people who are identifying somewhere, that could be considered Black, Indigenous, or people of color.
It's almost like the Black population of the United States is 13%. It's almost like Europeans are whites are, Caucasians, I should say, are the larger majority of the population in the United States. And also the Lord of the Rings or the Tolkien Legendarium in general is aimed more at European Caucasians like England.
Really? Wow.
Britain has, specifically England, but Britain has something aimed at them, which everybody who likes that culture would be like, oh, I like your content, I like your music, I like your movies, I like your books, I like your stuff. Why would they go to something that is something they would like? It's not saying that people in America, like the minorities, don't like it, because obviously if 13% African and American population of the United States and there's 13% of POCs, as they say, basically non-whites, are enjoying this content, that's not that far off of data that's going to say that they actually do enjoy the content, which means that most people in the United States would enjoy this. There are obviously people who, like my mom, who don't care about fantasy or anything. Like, she just wants to watch NCIS. It's like, okay, cool, knock yourself out. But like me trying to get my mom into watching Lord of the Rings, it'd be like pulling teeth from a cat covered in oil and slippery.
Is really interesting to consider. Why?
Sorry.
Is it the Legendarium itself, or is it the fandom that is proven hostile?
We're hostile to bad writing. We're hostile to activists. We're hostile to people who want to change things.
Yes,
from what they are
to
other
invaders,
things.
let's say.
We're hostile to zombies.
That too. But I think the real hostile people are the ones who think, oh, it's bad because this is not in it, so I'm going to fix it.
Yeah,
and
the
you all
hostile,
have to accept it.
The hostile people are the ones who are coming in to change things because they think there's a problem. If you don't think there's a problem, you wouldn't be hostile. If you think there's a problem, you're going to, by natural tendencies, be hostile. Like, this is basic stuff. That's not rocket science at all. If you like something, you're not going to be hostile to it because you already like it. But if you say, I like it, but it needs to change this, then you don't like it. You like the idea of it, but with a whole bunch of different content. Which, in other words, go read a different series. Go read a different book. Go watch a different show. Go watch a different movie. Go listen to different music. Go watch different anime. Go do different things. But you trying to change that content isn't good for anybody.
I mean, I think the experiences of, this seminar and the reaction to it definitely show. I think a lot of fans kind of got, a dash of cold water to the face that I think a lot of people from marginalized groups that are in the fandom are.
And the thing that she's kind of touching on right now, I don't know if she's actually going that way or not, but the thing that irritates me probably the most is all the normies or the other people that are allegedly of the fandom, but are trying to tolerate the behavior because they're a quote unquote ally, or because they don't hate black people, or they're not racist, they're not homophobic, they're not this, they're not that. So they allow whatever to come in because they want to be like, oh, I'm not this thing. It's like, you should have just, I don't care. Your content is not meant to be in this work. Only the author's content is meant to be in this work, and that's that. If you want something else, go somewhere else and do something else with it. Don't do it here. If you want to go make your obsolete Shadow Realm level website to write all your horrid stuff and be a horrible writer, knock yourself out. But don't be mad that people aren't coming to your site to watch your stuff or read your crap. Because nobody cares. It has nothing to do with anything. Like, the people who are enabling all this behavior are the problem. They're the ones who need to go away. Because they're not defending. They're sabotaging the gates. They're not defending the gates. They're causing more problems for those of us who defend the gates. It's having a turncoat amongst your midst. You need to cut them loose. Which is why, if they agree that there's a problem with the source material, they by default are not fans. It's the most basic of basic concepts. If you like something, you like it for how it is. If you like something, but not for how it is, then you don't like said thing. That's shocking. So, yeah, needless to say, very stupid take.
Like, yes, and, that's something that they've been experiencing for a long time. That came as a surprise, I think, to people.
Only because they choose to experience that.
What would happen if somebody came to her writings and said, oh, you're heterophobic every time they saw a gay couple?
Probably nothing.
But if you keep going and hounding, they'd get really bothered by it, wouldn't they?
Probably.
Like,
Yeah.
why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Be like, well, you're heterophobic. You're heterophobic. You're heterophobic. That's literally what they do to everyone that's not gay. They're like, oh, this is homophobic. Why aren't Gimli and Legolas licking each other's tonsils simultaneously? Why aren't they shagging in the forests or shagging in the mine shafts? Well, because that's not what they're supposed to do. Homophobic! It's like, really?
Yes.
Or they could have a healthy brotherly relationship, a healthy brotherly love, not trying to get in each other's pants, not giving them the meat and giving it to them raw. Like, it's none of that has anything to do with anything.
No, that's not Legolas and Gimli. That's Elrond and.
I know, but I'm saying it applies the same way, because Rings of Power is trying to play off as Durin and Elrond being the Gimli and Legolas, without the style or the culture.
Experienced that before, so I'm not sure where the reasoning is, but I definitely think that as a
You don't know.
Definitely not in this video.
fandom, and as the owner of a fandom group myself, it
Trying to throw her weight around there. We're like, I own a group.
Owner of a fandom group.
Probably has 30 authors in it.
Does this mean those people are her property, you could say?
Yes.
So she's a slave owner.
I think she means she owns the site, and everybody comes in and...
No, she specifically said, I own the fandom group.
Fandom group, not the fandom.
No, the group
gotta be charitable,
Oh,
even if she's being pompous.
It
Do we though?
forces us
You do. Otherwise, it's going to invalidate your side as well.
to consider, what we're doing to make our spaces more inviting.
But you're not inviting because you would not invite somebody who writes counter to your beliefs. You would
Yeah.
not invite somebody
I see.
healthy heterosexual relationships and
Why
not
are the continuum guys not invited? Right.
the continuum guys.
The PCC.
Oh, yeah. You're not going to invite the people who, like, the people who are like, we're the most tolerant are literally the most intolerant. And here's the thing, you shouldn't be tolerant towards everything. That's not healthy. It's not good. It's not a thing that's positive because there are some things that are bad. You shouldn't want people who are bad people showing up in your group. You're going to exclude them. But you can't say that somebody who disagrees with you is a bad person, because then you're the bad person to somebody else that you disagree with. Like everything you accuse somebody else of, you can be accused of. That's just how that works.
Wonderful, quite in depth as well. Thank you very much for answering that.
Yes, the most
Yes. Very nice.
ever.
Oh,
Our third question asks, how might Tolkien's canon and the way that it changes over drafts support diverse interpretations
It doesn't, in any shape or form.
in fan fiction? Could this have something to do with Tolkien fic writers' reliance on both affirmative and transformative methods?
what?
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly,
No one's understanding correctly.
we're looking at how the changes in drafts influence fan fiction. And I want to define two terms in there, since this is not necessarily a fan studies audience. Affirmative or affirmational and transformational are two types of fandom on a continuum. So they're not binary, even though they're often depicted that way. So affirmational would be people who place a lot of stock in the authority of the original creator, whereas transformational are people who are place a lot of stock in the perspectives of readers and fans. So fan fiction is generally placed by scholars more towards the transformational end. I make the argument in some of my papers that Tolkien fan fiction actually occupies a very middle ground. We're very affirmational. We love ourselves, our canon,
No, you don't.
and Tolkien fan fiction writers are some of the best, most knowledgeable people when it comes to that canon of people that I've met.
They literally aren't. Otherwise, they wouldn't be fan fiction stuff. They'd have entire worlds, entire universes written, but instead they're changing stuff because my diversity.
But at the same time, we play with it, right? And we see ourselves. We write to see ourselves in the stories very often. As far as considering,
that's the problem, but you can't tell.
There's various drafts. I do think that,
you don't even know why there's various drafts. You're trying to critique it. Okay, that's stupid.
Among, Tolkien fans, I think that most fan fiction writers are aware of the various drafts. And I've seen them I see it used in a lot of different ways. There are people who have a very coherent way of defining what counts as canon for them. So, Tolkien's last word is one you'll hear fairly often, where a fan fiction writer will say, well, this was what I analyzed, not necessarily Christopher Tolkien or any other scholar, but this is what my research shows that I analyze as Tolkien's final word. The parentage of Gil-galad would be, a prime example where Christopher Tolkien's interpretation and fan fiction writers' interpretations are often very different. But then
and that's the author's responsibility to acknowledge that they are the ones screwing up in this situation.
People who just kind of go wild and crazy in the drafts and pick the details that they like. So I think that you see a spectrum of anywhere.
You shouldn't just walk in and be like, I'll take this detail, I'll take this detail, and I'll take this detail. The rest of y'all can screw off. That's not how that works. You have to actively follow the whole kit and caboodle. You can't just take one strand here, one strand there. That's not how that works.
In there, as far as how people respond, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, definitely. Especially that concept of the spectrum of it as well, and people kind of dive in and take out what they want as well. It's sometimes when you see like people go in and they take out like a small quotation, but actually there's a large context behind that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tricky ground, I think, as you've kind of identified. Okay. Our next question then starts off by saying thank you for this fascinating analysis. The questioner has a personal question. If you
The questioner, eh?
be okay with a personal question, do you engage with
Are you okay with the personal question? Why are you gay?
fan fiction? And if so, do you have a
Would you say this is the gayest Lord of the Rings episode ever? Just be like the whole Lindsay headline. It's like, I absolutely would. It's like Lord of the Rings fans are the gayest nerds ever. Because in my world, Lord of the Rings fans are gay. The whole acolyte stupid
particular
interview.
topics / characters that you prefer or most like to engage with? Are these topics /
It's gonna be herself every time.
characters something you feel are lacking diversity in the canon?
I'm not so sure. It might be
That's why I
altering
do write fan fiction. That's how I got into all of this, so to speak. I run the Silmarillion Writers Guild, which honestly and a bit ironically means that I have less time to write fan fiction than if I didn't run a fan fiction group. But it opens up a space for lots of other people to write stories. My own.
You writing for your site does not reduce anybody else's ability to write for your site. That's not how that works.
No, it means that she is maintaining the site so that others can write on it.
Yes, but she said if I was doing it, she's implying that if I was
If
writing,
she was writing, she didn't have time for maintaining the site, and thus people couldn't post their stuff online.
maintain what? The sites don't have to have that kind of a maintenance.
I don't know how fan writing sites work, but I assume it needs some decent moderation efforts.
Well, that would depend. According to her, basically everything we consider debauchery is just all the
No,
way
but
through.
they need to filter out all of the normal fan fiction, right?
You could literally just have moderators then.
Yeah, but she's doing that herself, apparently. Maybe I don't know.
So all day, every day, all the time, she is doing this. She's not doing anything else. She doesn't have a job. She doesn't have breaks.
Well,
she doesn't sleep.
Sure, she probably has a job. Maybe I don't know. Hard to say.
Indeed, very hard to say. I don't know who would want to hire somebody this stupid.
Personal interests have always lied more with I write about the Silmarillion, obviously the Silmarillion Writers Guild, and I'm especially interested in the Feanorians, the House of Feanor. So that kind of led into some of my scholarly work, because my Tolkien studies work, not my fan studies work, is around the narrators and historical bias in the Legendarium, which originally was pinged for me as a fan fiction writer writing about the Feanorians and realizing that there's a very clear bias in the text. And so once I saw that,
What bias is in the text?
Well, none. Obviously.
So how do you find a bias that ain't there?
Magic, I don't know. Dark sorcery.
I feel like that's disrespectful to dark magic.
Good points.
it's like once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so then
I wish I could.
you see it
I
everywhere.
can't even see it, so
talked about
problem there.
We can see it everywhere. It's just not what she's saying. It's something else.
Yeah, but I can't see any biases in Lord of the Rings or Silmarillion.
or they're excluded entirely. They're present, but they're not discussed, or they're discussed, but they're discussed in one set of terms versus another group receives a different focus or a different quality of attention.
Maybe the groups are different.
So I have definitely turned my attention in recent years to writing about female characters in the Legendarium. So that is a group of characters that historically in Tolkien fan fiction did not receive positive attention. or at least the reactions to those stories often did not receive positive attention. That
Probably because
Really-
they were often Mary Sues, right?
So thank you for coming, everybody, and thank you.
Oh,
Wait
well,
10 minutes. Oh, that's a spoiler for next time.
that just rolled right on through. I have no idea.
Well, you turned on autoplay, right?
No,
No?
probably just passively on, but I didn't turn it on.
Fair enough. So, by the way, is Legendarium how you pronounce it? I didn't think so. But
Legendarium, but it's going to be different between British and non-British, I suppose.
no, I think even the British pronounce it Legendarium. And these people aren't British, right?
The guy who's moderating is.
Yeah, okay, sure. But the others also call it
Might
Legendarium.
be, might not be. Most of them are probably American psychopaths, but yeah.
Yeah.
That hurt.
hmm
I feel attacked. I feel
Do you?
violated.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
I feel disrespected. I feel hated. I could probably go on for a lot longer, but I don't
Yeah,
think it matters.
I don't think it adds much.
Well, she's just a heterophobic person. She's
Indeed.
anti-logic. She's anti-storytelling.
Is destabilizing cis hetero amateur normativity, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
I like what she said. When she said binary. I think you think it'd be binary, but it's not. And I'm thinking they're like, you're the kind of person I would walk up to and be like, sex is binary.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, no, there's
Well,
male, female, binary, non-binary, blah, blah, like all this type of stuff. And then you're like, no, there's binary and non-binary, which is binary.
wait a minute.
I know, right? It's great. It's fantastic. But yeah, I mean, I think I've said pretty much everything in it that I could really say without just recovering everything I said and stating it all over again.
Well, that's going to take 2 hours.
Maybe longer. I might have more to say as I go. I'll just think about more things and be like, oh, by the way, what about this? 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 Anyway. But yeah.
Yeah.
All in all, that was not a good one.
Not a good one indeed.
Yeah.
I mean, positive that there were slides that were used, I guess.
I
That's
suppose.
about it. Nothing else really of substance within it.
Yeah, it irritates me for the same reason other things in Wheel of Time irritate me and all that stuff. Like, not the books, but like how people treat the books. And they come to these conclusions that they had to make up in their own heads because they aren't realistic. What do you do? But
Yeah, well, such
That's-
as life.
that's going to be that one for us, folks. Let us know what you thought in the comments below. And also like the video if you enjoyed it. Share it with your friends, family, enemies, anybody available. If you think they would enjoy the content or something, whatever it might be. Yeah, you guys are appreciated for supporting us by even just watching the video. If that's all you do, it's appreciated. But your comments help with the algorithm, your likes do, your shares, getting more people, all that's good and greatly appreciated. I know Matt's got his real stuff in real life, and he's probably also got a stream tonight.
Yeah,
but-
you can check it out if you feel like it, I guess.
If you can find it.
That's
Is this-
also a thing. Yeah.
This is going to be posted at the same time. So-
Yeah.
But yes, thanks Sage for hanging out. I know it was a tricky bit, but we made it work.
Mhm.
So thank you, sir. And as usual, you have nothing because you are
Yeah.
nothing in the
I
YouTube
have
world.
nothing important.
Except
going on ever.
I have lost. Anyway, we'll go ahead and kick it off here, guys. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you on the next one. So remember, my friends, walk in the light.
Farewell.